in effect, a Russian enclave now, aren't they? And offering to send their own troops across the border.
Well, it's not only that, but they are going to host the nuclear inventory of Russia, which will be pointed elsewhere. And the modern weapons that have got hypersonic capability are so serious and they've got such a long reach, they will cover all of the rest of Europe. And that's why Belarus is a real threat, because it's bringing all those weapons forward.
Right.
So it's serious. Look, sanctions, it's like spitting in the wind. And people are not being told how much Russia and China have coordinated. That is going to be an economic bloc now. So all of the trade and all of the energy supplies here are not as essential as the Western leaders are making out.
OK. Look, Sally Livesley, good to talk to you. We'll speak to you a little bit later on. Thank you.
And if you've just joined us, it's 6:15. A very good morning to you. Here's what else is going on today. The United States is warning the capital of Ukraine could well be under siege. Overnight, authorities in Ukraine announced Russian missile strikes have hit Kyiv. The country's president, Vladimir Zelensky, has ordered a full military mobilization to counter the attack. He says at least 137 people have been killed and hundreds more are injured. Ukraine's interior minister says a Russian aircraft they shot down crashed into a 9-story residential building, causing an enormous fire.
The new online safety bill would give social media users more power to block anonymous trolls. Draft legislation will give people the option to opt out of seeing harmful content online.
Rape victims are being continually and systematically failed by the criminal justice system. That's according to a prosecution watchdog. A lack of cooperation between police and prosecutors and poor communication with victims is being blamed for cases taking an average of 2 years to come to trial.
Car production fell to its lowest January total in 13 years as semiconductor shortages and global supply issues took their toll. Despite an increase in the number of electric vehicles being made, just under 69,000 cars left factories last month. That's down 20% on the year before.
3 former Minneapolis police officers have been convicted of violating 46-year-old George Floyd's civil rights in June 2020. The trio were all charged with failing to provide medical aid when the police officer Derek Chauvin held his knee into Mr. Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes.
Consumer confidence has plunged this month to its lowest rate since the worst points in the pandemic. Experts are blaming a perfect storm of worries about food and energy price increases, tax hikes and rising interest rates. This is the situation in Kyiv this morning. You can see that tower block. We can't see that. I don't think we can pull that full frame, can we? At all, so we can look at that in a bit more detail and some of the damage there. And there have been reports of explosions in Kyiv overnight. And obviously so many people, we saw those scenes yesterday, the roads absolutely blocked, trying to get out of Kyiv, though, of course, some are staying, some have no choice but to stay. But there is real concern now, and as we were hearing from Dr. Sally Livesley, real concern that this is now the strategy of Putin is just to move forward and take over the whole country. And actually now we've pulled out of that, you can see
it already looks relentless, doesn't it?
It does look
huge
relentless.
Damage. And if you're living in that area, you would, of course, be frightened for your life.
Well, let's talk to journalist Mircea Babu, who's in Mariupol, which is in the Donetsk region, and joins us now. Morning to you. I mean, what can you tell us about the situation there this morning?
Good morning. So here in Mariupol, eastern Ukraine, we had a fairly quiet night, if you count that. We just had 2 or 3 airstrikes around 2 a.m. And just one 3 or 4 minutes ago, as I was listening to your presentation about the situation in Kyiv. It might sound weird, but to us here, it's been a quiet night. And to me personally, it's been the first night when I managed to sleep more than 2 hours in the last 3 days. So overall, it's still a very stressful situation for people here, severe disruption in basic services such as food or ATMs or phone coverage. For now, that might change throughout the day or in the next following days. And what people are telling me, I spoke with them yesterday when everyone was, the whole world was tuning in on Ukraine, and I was speaking with people both on the pro-Russian side as well as the and I think you can hear the alarm now, and we've been having these alarms here in Mariupol as well throughout the day and last night as well. So just getting back to what I was saying, I spoke with people yesterday in the city of Mariupol, both pro-Russians and a small minority of about 10%. 10% they say that are pro-Kyiv. They would like the city to stay under Ukrainian control. And both sides claim or say they don't want the war to happen. But at the same time, on one side, you have some sort of expectation for Russian troops to march in any moment now, any hour. They do expect Russian tanks to storm into the city and take control of it. We have not seen any Ukrainian soldiers in the city, no checkpoints whatsoever. For the most part, there's no military presence in the city itself. But again, that obviously might change throughout the day.
When you hear those sirens go off, what are you meant to do? What is the government advice to ordinary civilians? So
there's a loud announcement going on every 3-4 hours in Mariupol with that absolutely terrifying sound, one that sends chills down your shiver. And this, to me, as I would say and consider myself an experienced war journalist. I've covered conflict in the last 10-12 years in different parts of the world, and I still get a horrifying and a terrible feeling of insecurity and fear every time I hear that noise. You hear the noise, and then there's an announcement saying that when you hear this noise, please go immediately to the nearest shelter. And people should do that, and I do it myself. When I hear that noise, I go to the hotel shelter, or if I'm in the city, I'll go to the nearest shelter available. And how I know that is that they're on Google Maps, they're available online, and if you don't have phone access, there's a sign next to the major shelters where you can find them easily by the signs and marks on the building, but most flats do have like a basement where people can hide, and they've been doing that honestly throughout the day yesterday, and at one point last night, some of the people here in Mariupol probably went to the shelter at least at 2 a.m. when that loud bang and thump basically woke up everyone in the hotel.
Look, yeah, obviously you've been seeing Ukrainians out and about in the city. What is their understanding of what is going on, and how annoyed are they? Because there was clearly an annoyance from President Zelensky in what he said overnight, in saying, you know, our allies are in effect watching from afar. They're not getting involved in this. Does that anger and frustration, can you sense that amongst the people?
I wouldn't say I sense it here, because do keep in mind eastern region, this is a 90%, an overwhelming majority pro-Russian people, and these people don't look at Zelensky's political statements as they might in Kyiv, people in western Ukraine and other cities around the country. They actually don't have any expectations whatsoever from Zelensky. Speaking yesterday with a lady, her name was Katya, and she was telling me, I could care less what Zelensky says at the moment. To me, I'm tuning in what President Vladimir Putin is saying, because in my opinion, he's the one who's going to decide the fate of my city.
Yeah, that's an
says it all, doesn't
interesting.
it?
Yeah,
It really
okay. Meche Babu in Mariupol, thanks for talking to us this morning.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and don't forget to get in touch with us with your views on this, and particularly how you're coping, even just amongst your own family, how you're talking about it, how you're coping with the stress and the worry. Goodness knows if it's bad for us, how it is in an ordinary Ukrainian family at the moment. Do stay with us, though, because we'll be taking a look at today's papers a bit later on. First of all, though, here's the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Following yesterday's cold winds and wintry showers, it is a freezing start in places this morning. Frost and ice about, but plenty of sunshine, and it's looking like a decent day as high pressure builds in from the southwest. That's going to kill off the wind and the showers this morning, and it will lead to plenty of sunshine for at least a few hours in most places. So a bright start to the day, still 1 or 2 showers coming through the Irish Sea coast and northwest England, the Midlands, for example. Otherwise, they tend to ease during the morning. By this afternoon, plenty of sunshine breaking out, and with lighter winds compared to yesterday, it will feel pleasant enough in that sunshine. Temperatures reaching 10 or 11 Celsius in Cardiff, Southampton, London, Plymouth, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8s and 9s. But for Western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, cloud and some outbreaks of rain move in by the end of the afternoon, falling as snow over the Scottish mountains. That moves through, but it stays cloudy for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, and increasingly breezy tonight and through the early hours of Saturday. Also breezy for western coasts of England and Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells, lighter winds, a touch of frost, 1 to 3 Celsius in the southeast, whereas for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 6 and 7 Celsius because of the breeze and because of the cloud. Mostly, Saturday's looking like a dry day. There'll be plenty of sunshine for England and Wales, hazy sunshine at times with some high cloud in the sky. But thicker cloud for Scotland and Northern Ireland, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle at times, mainly over western hills, and increasingly windy, risk of gales for the Western Isles as well as for Shetland. That breeze, though, coming in from the south will allow temperatures to reach 9 or 10 Celsius in most spots. Sunday sees an area of rain move in from the west. This will be heavy at first for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. It'll move through into central areas and tend to weaken.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
.28, you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV and on your radio this morning.
yes indeed, Acting Director and Senior Lecturer of the Russia Institute at King's College London, Dr. Adnan Vatantseva joins us now. Obviously, we're still talking about the situation in Ukraine. Hello there, Adnan. We're just, everybody is wondering at the moment what is happening at the moment and what other countries could come under attack by Russian forces, which could actually escalate the situation, particularly for NATO.
Well, it's been quite obvious from the past week, at least. It's hard to predict what Putin's next action would be. It's obviously the incursion in Ukraine and the full-scale invasion in Ukraine was quite a surprise for many. Maybe not so much for the U.S. intelligence, as they noted from quite a few weeks ago about that. But the next step after that, whether another country will become a target, is kind of touches on areas that are quite different from the current setup. Other countries that might be targeted, if we are talking about Baltic countries, which are members of NATO, it just reduces to a large extent the possibility that there could be an escalation to that level. If we talk about other countries that are not part of NATO, such as Moldova, for instance, that is, of course, a much higher possibility.
Those countries could be feeling particularly tense at the moment. They could be next.
Well, the countries that are feeling it are the most concerned at the moment are those that actually have borders with Ukraine, with Belarus as well, and especially the Baltic countries that are actually right next to Russia. And that's where most of the concerns are. That's where the people are basically living. A lot of them are living with fear.
In terms of what we can do at this stage, away from getting involved militarily, which obviously we don't want to do and NATO doesn't want to do at this stage, how effective are all of these sanctions? Because our previous guest, Sally Livesley, was saying, well, when you look at Russia and how they're combining with China, it in effect creates an economic bloc. And so it's actually going to be quite difficult, she thinks, to put enough pressure, economic pressure, on Russia through sanctions.
Yes, indeed, that's a great question. And considering that the sanctions were first launched in 2014 after Russia's annexation of Crimea, there is already a history of almost 8 years of sanctions, and one can question to what extent they have been effective, and then one can question to what extent the new series of sanctions would be. Well, it really depends how you define what's your yardstick to claim that sanctions are successful or failed. If your yardstick is whether Russia is changing its foreign policy, whether it is actually removing its troops from Ukraine, no, that has not been effective. And in the past, they have not been effective in the sense that Russia has not got out of Crimea as well. But it does not necessarily mean that a new series of sanctions will not be effective. The reason is that the sanctions that the UK has announced and the US have announced, and as well as EU is likely to announce more details on their sanctions, they are a lot more comprehensive compared to the previous sanctions. And that actually raises the risk for the Russian economy quite further. Now, on the other hand, if the question is about Russia turning its face towards Asia and especially its more intensifying relations with China, yes, that's been already happening for years. It's nothing new. One can expect further intensification of their economic relationship, but Russia's main partner is still Europe. It's not going to be that easy for Russia to actually to replace Europe as an economic partner, and that's the reality they're facing. And considering that the new sanctions are actually they're quite comprehensive, and they're also set in a way that it's hard to predict what would be the next series of sanctions, how more intense they will be. This lack of predictability is a major factor that makes sanctions become more effective, because they are creating more panic in the Russian markets, more panic among Russians in terms of their for the future of their economy. And in that sense, one can claim that there's still likelihood that they could be effective. And the last point would be, if you consider the past 8 years that Russia has been under sanctions, yes, Russia has not stepped back from its foreign policy approach, but one can argue that the damage on the economy has been still significant. I mean, consider the year before the Crimea annexation, 2013. Russia had just overtaken Italy as one of Europe's largest economy. It was on the way of overtaking France and the UK. And now, currently, Russia is no longer in the top 10 economies in the world. It's smaller than Korea's economy. And consider another decade of that, and Russia will be a lot poorer. And the gap between Russia and the size of the economy in major countries in Europe will keep growing. That is not something that Putin would like to see, and that's not something that Russian citizens would like to see. And at some point, they will feel the difference as well.
OK. Look, really good to talk to you, Dr. Adnan Vatanseva from the Russia Institute at King's College. Thanks very much.
So much more to discuss, so much more to try and understand too. Well, we'll continue doing that throughout the programme. After the break, we'll be discussing a new bill which could raise the minimum age for marriage in England and Wales. So don't go away.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is 6:36. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne live across the UK on your TV and on your radio.
So let's take a look at today's front pages. The Mirror shows a victim of the conflict bandaged following a raid on the city of Kyiv, I think, in northern Ukraine. Her blood is on Putin's hands. That's what it says.
The Daily Mail reports that Russian forces were closing in on Kyiv last night, saying Putin could seize the capital within days.
The Telegraph's top line says a new Cold War in Europe has begun following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Western powers have moved to isolate Russia economically and politically.
Well, we're going to step away from Ukraine a little bit for the next few minutes. We will, of course, keep you fully up to date with exactly what's going on. But let's look through some of the other stories in the papers with the broadcaster Liz Kershaw and political commentator Benedict Spence. Morning to both of you.
Hiya.
Liz, let's have a look at The Guardian, should we? And voting rights in the EU.
Can I just say, do you ever remember that Not the 9 o'clock news?
Oh,
and
yes.
they had a sketch. And it was, tonight is the outbreak, we report on the outbreak of World War III, but we ask, does sitting in a comfy chair really relax your legs? And that's a bit what, we're not oblivious, Benedict and I, to what's going on, but we are looking at the lighter side of life in this segment.
Well, you have to a bit, don't you?
Some people don't think these two are living in a vacuum. Have they no idea what's going on?
Oh,
so,
no.
Yeah,
we know that. In fact, it affects everything, and it's going to affect everything.
Anyway, in Europe, of course, it's been pandemic, and before that, Brexit, and news today that, 1.5 million Britons or something live in places like the south of France, and across the continent, and they were granted and assured of residency rights if they applied on time to remain there. And the shock now is that they're not going to be allowed to vote. So even if you are a property owner, maybe you work, you pay your taxes, you're not going to be able to vote in local or national elections.
Hang on, vote where?
In the country in which
you're living.
So if you, for instance, an example, people living in the south of France, Alice, a retired civil servant who's lived in the south of France for 37 years, has just been told, you know, no, you can't vote. I think that's not reciprocated here, because I think if you are a citizen of an EU country like France or Poland, and you come to live in the UK and your residency was promised after Brexit, you know, people were reassured, yes, you can stay, and you applied. I'm sure they can vote.
Yeah, I don't know.
No,
Off the top of my head, got to be honest.
I mean, it's one of those things where you might go, well, if you're not prepared to take up, you know, go through all the process of taking up citizenship of that country, I don't think it's necessarily unfair. We might see it as unfair in this country, but you know, I understand that other nations, perhaps they like a little bit more sort of guarantee, a little bit more sort of a dedication to it, rather than people who live between two places. That's not for us in this country, but you know, that's what other countries might like to do, and we have to respect that. And I think that that's part of the contract that you take up when you decide to sort of live your life beyond two countries. You know, if you do like that country enough, perhaps, as it were, put your, not your money where your mouth is, put your personality, put yourself into that person's, into that nation, and fully commit to it.
Well, we know we're watched by a lot of people living in Europe, actually, at the moment. So if you are an expat, how expat are you, in fact? And do you have voting rights in the country in which you're living? Do you retain voting rights in Britain?
Maybe it's news. Maybe it is genuinely news to them this morning, because this is a ruling, you know, like yesterday.
No, we'd love to hear from you. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Please do.
To the Times, Benedict, looking at tax cuts.
Yes. Ageing population is an obstacle to immediate tax cuts, says Sunak, is the headline. So if you're sitting at home and you're 65, the Chancellor says it's all your fault. Yeah, this is obviously because, you know, there's going to be the gradual increase in the upper age of the country. And it must be said, actually, generally, the general good health, but chronic disease that sort of creeps in as you get older, means that things like social care is going to cost us a lot more. We're going to be shelling out a lot more for sort of things that pensioners get for free, you know, bus passes and all that sort of thing. Obviously, a lot of pressure on the NHS. What this means ultimately is that younger people aren't going to be let off when it comes to tax hikes, and they will bear the brunt. Now, this, I understand a lot of older people will say, well, they've paid into the system, they've served their time. But if you're sort of looking at this in the broader picture, beyond yourself as an individual, this stops young people getting onto property ladders, this stops investment in other areas, this takes money out of education. So whilst it might make your life a little bit more convenient, in the long term, your children, your grandchildren, and those that come after you, those who you do have a social contract with, even though you will never meet them, are going to be poorer off in the long term. And I'm afraid this is, you know, it's the trade-off ultimately with having a longer life, a better quality of life for longer, and having access to the best kind of healthcare, is that there do have to be some sacrifices. The question we need to ask in this country, as we sort of atrophy, as our social services begin to atrophy, as the NHS, you know, sort of collapses in on itself whenever there's a winter crisis, as is every year, is this something that we can bear? Or actually, should elderly people, as much as they've not had it easy in life, should they perhaps also be taking on a little bit more later in life, you know, paying a little bit more into the system from their pensions, taking out a little less in contributions, or putting their houses back onto the market for younger people? There are many things, I'm afraid, difficult choices that have to be made.
You're asking me because you see me as an elderly person.
Well, no.
I know you do.
No, a rational voice.
I don't see you as an elderly person, Liz Kershaw. You know that. But you are in your 60s. And proudly so.
Yeah.
So
I think the problem here as well is the declining birth rate. People aren't having children. Young couples are not having children. And that's partly the financial pressures, you know, the huge cost of housing, as Benedict said. But also during the pandemic 2 years, the birth rate's fallen. You know, you think, would I bring a child into this? This latest conflict isn't going to help. No. But there's something else very quickly that I said at the time when they brought in student loans, university tuition fees of first 3 and then 9 as it is now. And there were changes to the rules coming up this week, how you repay it. When you go for a mortgage, that's all taken into consideration. My son and his wife are a young couple. You know, it's not encouraging for young women to have children.
No,
when they've got this debt hanging over £50,000-100,000 for the whole of their working life. And that's a real problem. We don't have enough babies, and we don't therefore have enough young humans to replace the economically active population, the workforce.
Yeah. No,
so go out and make babies is what I say.
Well,
how do you afford them? Yeah, I did my bit.
I only have so many hours in the day.
Done our bit.
Yeah, exactly.
That, yeah.
But that's what I face when you talk with young people now. They talk about Brexit, they talk about pandemic, I mean, what's happening at the moment as well, cost of living, and they cannot see any reason to try and bring children into the world. They really can't. And it's difficult to defend it.
When you're getting to that stage where I think young people are trying to make lots of excuses for why they're not having children, I do also think, because I do agree, actually, a lot of young people, they struggle, as I've just said, with their finances and all that sort of thing. But, there is also this sort of twin track where they're told they need to get on the career ladder, they need to get jobs, they need to get qualifications, and then they're not paid enough. But we do need to remember, we are actually living at the best time in human history when you take absolutely everything into consideration. Quality of living, access to education, quality of housing, all that sort of thing. Previous generations have all had it relatively worse, and they've all managed to procreate.
I found myself actually saying that to one of my sons the other day, people in my generation, it wasn't me, but I was lucky, but people of my generation lived in little tiny houses with outdoor loos. And it's not, that's not a laugh.
There needs to be give and take across the generation.
You don't know, you're having it good, to which he said, well, look at what's happening in the world.
Well, you can't keep all the people happy all the time, somebody once said. Liz, Benedict, we've got to leave it there for now, but we'll catch up with you.
What, no breast and bowel cancer to cheer us
We'll do that
up?
next time. We look forward to that.
Later.
Yeah.
But actually, sticking with the theme of young people, schools should do more to encourage young people to consider apprenticeships. That's according to Labour's Shadow Skills MP, Toby Perkins. The MP has been to a training centre for automotive car apprentices and discovered that very few students have been told that their options included actually not going to university. So let's hear from our reporter, Will Hollis.
In Derby, apprentices are fixing a future for themselves.
Just let that go, pump it a bit.
Millie's avoiding the classroom in favour of the workshop.
Ordering parts and talking to customers, you don't do that in college because you're just looking at a textbook or at a computer. So you just get a proper feel for the job, and obviously if it's not for you, then you can learn that.
We've got 9 learners today, and they're going to be stripping engines down, getting a little bit more exposure to tasks that they may not see in their own workplace.
More than 100 apprentices train here at Remit's Automotive Centre alongside their paid work with major companies. It's an industry that's crying out for talent.
Right now there is a massive skill shortage throughout the country, not just in jobs like this, but across many industries. And people here think that apprenticeships could be the start of the answer to fixing that problem.
We have to think very, very differently now as an employer compared to what we did previously. But the message really for us, it's all about attraction, trying to get the right numbers of people and the right people coming through so we can fill those vacancies as they arise.
Visiting today, Chesterfield MP and Shadow Skills Minister Toby Perkins. The government's just passed its Skills Bill, an attempt to boost training for over 16s. Toby says schools need to do better at highlighting the benefit of apprenticeships.
We have skill shortages in a whole variety of areas, and Brexit's obviously exacerbated those. So it's really important that parents and young people see the opportunities that there are within apprenticeships, that government do more to make it easier.
Labour says the number of people starting apprenticeships has dropped dramatically since 2017. And under its own plans, the party would create 100,000 new apprentices each year, 10,000 of those here in the East Midlands. The government says it will boost funding for apprenticeships by 2025, while increasing flexibility for trainees. Remit's CEO says without more cash, the scheme will break down.
It'd be good if the joined-up thinking from government was how do they successfully promote apprenticeships so that they're seen as a really go-to option and a good alternative to an FE college or a degree programme. but how do we really get the funding that's appropriate for some of the programs, and how do we get them changed so that they meet the demands of what an employer needs?
With empty positions in every industry, solving the problem won't be a quick job. Will Hollis for GB News in the East Midlands.
Thanks very much indeed, Will. Its time is 6:49. Now, today, MPs in the House of Commons will debate a bill which could increase the minimum age for marriage and civil partnerships to 18 in England and Wales.
Yeah, currently, of course, you can marry at 16 or 17 with parental consent, but campaigners are a little bit concerned about that. Let's talk to Alice Porter, who's here in the studio. Morning to you.
Good morning.
Why is this causing concern for some people?
Well, as you were saying there, the age in which people can get married in England, Wales and Northern Ireland is 16 or 17 with parents' permission, which in theory sounds fine. The concern is when does permission come coercion? And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that particularly girls are being pressured into marrying sometimes much older men, and it obviously has huge impacts on their life and their education, and that's the worry. I mean, in terms of numbers, there's only a couple of hundred of legally recognised ceremonies that take place involving 16 or 17-year-olds every year in the country. But the worry is because of this legal framework that's in place, there will be other children who will be involved in religious ceremonies that aren't necessarily legal, but the parents will feel emboldened by this because child marriage is legal in this country. And it's kind of incredible to think of because, of course, at 16 or 17, you can't buy alcohol, you can't get a tattoo, but you can marry. And there is the worry that particularly some girls from certain communities are being pressured and coerced into marrying much older men.
I suppose the problem is if you do bring up the legal age of marriage, you are going to stop some people who do want to get married at 16 for all sorts of different reasons. You're going to actually make it illegal for them to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we do have this slightly sort of dewy-eyed image that there'll be sort of some childhood sweethearts out there who won't be able to get married. But the evidence suggests that actually those cases are actually very rare. And what is more concerning is if we look at, say, the forced marriage unit, about a quarter of the cases they're dealing with are those who are under the age of 18. So put that into context, between 2016 and 2020, they dealt with more than 1,800 cases involving people who were under the age of 18. And the forced marriage unit, don't get me wrong, does amazing work, but the onus is on the child to come forward in a very coercive situation and come forward and say, I'm being pressured into marriage. So what this bill would do would take the onus away from a child in an incredibly difficult situation and say that it is illegal, and what's more, would criminalise anybody who is trying to involve and organise that wedding.
Yeah, I mean, if you are a childhood sweetheart and wanting to get married at under 18, should you? I mean, would you do it?
Well, times have changed, I suppose, haven't they? Times have changed. In the olden days, I can imagine that if a young girl got pregnant at 16 with her childhood sweetheart, and parents would have probably thought the wisest thing is for them to do the decent thing, get married. Even in my family, I know of a case that happened. I mean, many moons ago now, but that was seen to be the solution to a very awkward problem. But nowadays, I suppose, that sort of marriage being a solution to a teenage pregnancy isn't there, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, society's changed so much, and we have a situation where the government quite rightly brought in a few years ago that they want children to stay in education up until the age of 18. Well, that is completely different to the way society was 50 years ago. So if you've got the government saying we want children to remain, and we are talking children, in education toward the age of 18, having a situation where we're allowing and permitting them to get married, and potentially, as I say, particularly girls will then more likely than not be taken out of education and potentially caring for a husband in that situation. And I think many people would argue that's not something that we want for our future generations.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting point, isn't it? I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
It makes it very clear cut, I suppose, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. 18 does seem to be
I wonder if there's
sensible
anyone
age.
watching, actually, at the moment who was married at 16 or 17.
Maybe.
Yeah.
GBviews at gbnews.uk. Alice, thank you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. Can we show you the picture from that we have from Kyiv this morning? We're going to get that up for you. Looking at some of the destruction which has happened overnight. There have been more shellings in Kyiv. Oh, this is Maidan Square, which is pretty quiet. This is in the centre of Kyiv for you this morning. But there has been overnight shelling, and a lot of concern now that Vladimir Putin, his strategy is not to stick to those coastal regions around Odessa to try and secure those crucial ports, and in effect, over time, let the rest of Kyiv and Ukraine just sort of wither away and then maybe move in a few years' time. The concern seems to be that he's pushing now to take over the whole of Ukraine in a fairly swift sort of movement. And we've talked about his air superiority at the moment, but there are also masses of tanks on the border. And it's worth bearing in mind that tanks are what they call force multipliers. And so they can make a huge difference to the numbers and the massive numbers of troops they already have on the ground.
What is evident is that he is going to do it no matter what we do at this stage. In fact, even President Biden said that sanctions were going to be more or less useless at the moment. And then President Biden indicated that the one sanction that a lot of the experts saying could really work, which was to expel them from SWIFT, which is the banking system upon which their economy really does depend, we are told. To expel them from SWIFT is something that President Biden, would like to do, but he said the rest of Europe doesn't seem to be very keen to do at this stage, implying that it's the EU countries that don't want to do this, because we are now briefed that Boris Johnson does want to expel from SWIFT.
He mentioned in the House of Commons last night, didn't he, that SWIFT was something they were wanting to keep on the table. I think the concern is, I don't know if it's France, I could be wrong on that.
And or Germany.
But who are owed billions of pounds from Russia, and if they stop SWIFT, then they're not going to get it.
They're never going to get that back. But would they anyway now in these circumstances?
Well, I don't know, but it's a huge
it's the one sanction that all the experts say possibly would work, and we're not using it. No, and why not?
Not yet. Well, we'll maybe get some answers for you when we talk to our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's going to be joining us with the very latest on Russia's offensive in Ukraine in just a couple of minutes. First, though, let's have a look at your Friday forecast.
Hello again, I'm Ada McGiven. Following yesterday's cold winds and wintry showers, it is a freezing start in places this morning, frost and ice about, but plenty of sunshine, and it's looking like a decent day as high pressure builds in from the southwest. That's going to kill off the wind and the showers this morning, and it will lead to plenty of sunshine for at least a few hours in most places. So a bright start to the day, still 1 or 2 showers coming through the Irish Sea coast and northwest England, the Midlands, for example. Otherwise, they tend to ease during the morning. By this afternoon, plenty of sunshine breaking out, and with lighter winds compared to yesterday, it will feel pleasant enough in that sunshine. Temperatures reaching 10 or 11 Celsius in Cardiff, Southampton, London, Plymouth, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8s and 9s. But for Western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, cloud and some outbreaks of rain move in by the end of the afternoon, falling as snow over the Scottish mountains. That moves through, but it stays cloudy for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, and increasingly breezy tonight and through the early hours of Saturday. Also breezy for western coasts of England and Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells, lighter winds, a touch of frost, 1 to 3 Celsius in the southeast, whereas for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 6 and 7 Celsius because of the breeze and because of the cloud. Mostly, Saturday's looking like a dry day. There'll be plenty of sunshine for England and Wales, hazy sunshine at times with some high cloud in the sky. But thicker cloud for Scotland and Northern Ireland, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle at times, mainly over Western Hills, and increasingly windy, risk of gales for the Western Isles as well as for Shetland. That breeze, though, coming in from the south will allow temperatures to reach 9 or 10 Celsius in most spots. Sunday sees an area of rain move in from the west. This will be heavy at first for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. It'll move through into central areas and tend to weaken.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Multiple explosions rocked the Ukraine for a second night, leaving residential buildings ablaze.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 25th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne. And we're live, of course, across the UK and on your TV and radio. Here is what you are waking up to this morning.
Well, Ukraine's foreign minister says Kyiv has been hit by rocket strikes overnight as the country's air defences shoot down a Russian aircraft.
President Vladimir Zelensky pleads for help from the West, saying, "Who is ready to fight alongside us? I don't see anyone." He added that the Russian invasion has led to 137 deaths.
Well, meanwhile, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has revealed a package of further EU sanctions against Russia.
Well, this is the picture in Kyiv this morning. You can't see anything happening there, but overnight it has been bad. We'll keep you up to date with the very latest.
And of course, we want your views on the situation in Ukraine this morning. Let us know if and how it's affecting you. Drop us an email at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
And don't forget to let us know how you're coping at the moment. I mean, clearly the situation is terrible for anyone in Ukraine, and everybody in Kyiv is worried that it won't be long before their city is taken over. But back here in Britain, I know as a parent, it's difficult answering questions from the rest of the family, from your children, about is World War III going to happen? And certainly if young people are looking at the front pages of the newspapers or just listening and watching the headlines, it is a depressing situation. It's one that people thought would never, ever happen in the 21st century, for heaven's sake. And yet we parents, I think, we older people who are going to try and put some perspective on it, are trying to actually calm their woes. But can you? I'd love to hear how you're coping in your family at the moment. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let us know.
Well, it is a huge concern, of course, I mean, particularly for the people of Ukraine, where the Russian attack on Kyiv has continued overnight. Further strikes, as we heard, on parts of Kyiv, and including one tower block that was hit, and then there was a fire that erupted after that. But there have been attacks across infrastructure, particularly military infrastructure, right across parts of Ukraine in the last 24 hours.
Yes, and our GB News Home and Security Editor, Mark White, has the latest. So, Mark, what do we know?
Good morning, Anne. Good morning, Stephen. Yes, in terms of the developments overnight, we had air raid sirens that sounded around about 4 a.m. in the morning, Ukrainian time, in the capital, Kyiv. Those air raid sirens preceded by a number of missile strikes, a very significant number of missile strikes, according to Ukrainian authorities. Now, there are pictures starting to emerge of damaged residential areas in the capital. There is also reports of an aircraft that is down. Again, there are pictures that are circulating showing an aircraft that's down. What we don't know at this stage is whether this is a Ukrainian aircraft or a Russian aircraft. We know, according to the Ukrainian military yesterday, that they claim to have shot down a number of Russian helicopters using British-supplied missile systems, these shoulder-launched missile systems that they were given by the UK in recent weeks. There was about 100 UK soldiers, actually, in Ukraine to help out the Ukrainians in the training of these systems. They have them, but that's it, really, as far as any military assistance from the West is concerned, because, of course, as you know, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. Therefore, it's not going to get any help from NATO. It's getting tough words, of course, from Western governments. But as President Zelensky has said overnight, you know, that's not enough. He feels, and his country feels, very alone this morning.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of frustration, isn't there, Mark, from President Zelensky, but it's very difficult to know, without engaging Russia directly, what the West can now do.
Well, certainly on the military front, not a lot. Now, it will be interesting to see, having supplied weapons like these Javelin shoulder-launched missiles, anti-tank weapons primarily, but can be used, as we've seen, to shoot down aircraft as well, whether they will continue to supply them now that the battle has commenced, or whether they feel that would be too provocative to Russia. So what is happening in the meantime is that the UK, the US, France, other allies are bolstering their presence in Eastern Europe. And they say that, you know, the irony of this, of course, is that President Putin says he is so exercised about the ever eastward expansion of NATO. Well, he is now getting a massive NATO presence as this alliance, which felt so unloved under the years of Donald Trump's presidency, now feels reinvigorated and reunited, is bolstering their defences in NATO Baltic states, in Poland and Romania and Lithuania and the like. So they're there, but obviously they are not going to go into Ukraine, but they're there to deal with a potential humanitarian crisis. And again, some news from President Zelensky this morning talking of 100,000 people who have fled the fighting so far. Now, they've not all spilled over the border into these surrounding NATO countries, but a significant number have, especially across the Ukrainian border into Poland, which has 6 reception centres there that have been set up to help deal with them, to give them some initial medical care, to look after them, and to look to sort of placements for them while this fighting continues in their country.
OK, Mark, for now, thank you.
Joining us now is Sally Leavesley, a security expert. It's difficult to know where to start because there are so many aspects to think about now that it has actually happened. How did we come to this, and what will happen next?
Well, we've come to it because there hasn't been a strong enough opposition to President Putin. But also, President Putin has had the friendship of China, and that may have given him a lot of support in the way that he's operating. It may protect him against the sanctions. Very significantly, China is a bigger energy user, so that may be the alternate for the sales of energy. We have underestimated also the power which President Putin wants to exert over Europe. And
why is he doing it? Is it a legacy thing? Because he's, what, 69 now, isn't he?
Well, he's still a bit young to be thinking of his legacy. I think he is considering the recovery of Russia and considering the economic recovery of Russia through force.
But he's spending money. I mean, he's risking that as well, isn't he?
At the moment, he's not risking it because the nuclear powers in NATO haven't stepped up. But they're going to have to think about it very, very quickly.
In terms of what we're doing now, I mean, obviously sanctions, which, you know, if they bite, are going to take some time to bite. There's a lot of concern over them. But what they will do quite quickly is bite over here.
Well, if we consider the way energy is going, and talking about the British household waking up this morning, I think there are a couple of things that are worrying. People who've had past traumatic experiences, I think, will be triggered by this and by the constant news information and starting to see the beginning of an attack. And this is only the beginning of an attack on Kyiv and other areas. So the conversations in the households are going to have to reassure children and anxious people that Britain actually is safe in comparison to many parts of Europe.
And are we?
Yes, we are, because Britain, along with France, is a nuclear power. And Russia has a very rational understanding of nuclear weapons. So our biggest protection is that nuclear capability.
You've got to say, there doesn't seem to be much rational about President Putin at the moment, though. I mean, as our own Defence Secretary said, he's gone tonto.
I'm surprised that people have fallen for a lot of play acting. Remember that Putin comes out of Russian security services. He's a consummate actor, and he controls people with the way he looks at them, and he exerts power. But we have seen a vulnerability. When he had his Security Council meeting, he showed restlessness and he showed agitation. And if we think about it, it was just before he was going to go in. He wants certainty. Now, our nuclear powers give uncertainty. But from our point of view, in the British household this morning, as well as having a bit of anxiety, the other problem is what our energy costs are going to be.
Well, we only rely on Russian gas, about 3% of our energy supply.
There's been a lot of reassurance about that, but the spot gas market, the cost of energy around the world is going to go through the roof. And if you think of a protracted issue going on in Ukraine, if you get the other countries starting to work out for wartime, the costs of energy in the British household are going to be spectacular. So we've seen no government policy yet to give us a protection against that. The ordinary householder cannot manage the effects of this war.
Look, Sally, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Crumbs. No, it is very distressing.
It is. Well, look, it is 10 minutes past 7. If you're just joining us, let's bring you up to date this morning. And the United States is warning the capital of Ukraine could well be under siege. Overnight, authorities in Ukraine announced Russian missile strikes have hit Kyiv. The country's president, Vladimir Zelensky, says at least 137 people have been killed and hundreds more injured. Ukraine's interior minister says a Russian aircraft they shot down crashed into a 9-storey residential building, causing a fire. Meanwhile, protests against Russia's invasion are taking place in Moscow. 1,000 people have been arrested.
3 former Minneapolis police officers have been convicted of violating 46-year-old George Floyd's civil rights. That was back in June 2020, of course. The 3 of them were charged with failing to provide medical aid when the police officer we know of, Derek Chauvin, held his knee into Mr. Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes.
Consumer confidence has plunged to its lowest rate since the worst points in the pandemic. Experts blaming the perfect storm of worries about food and energy, price increases, tax hikes, rising interest rates, and you can also probably, moving forward, throw the Ukrainian situation into the mix as well on that one. Well, let's bring you the latest on the situation in Ukraine, get some more analysis for you and talk to Professor Malcolm Chalmers, who's Deputy Director General of RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, and a former special advisor to the government on national security strategy. Good morning to you. It's good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Look, just your analysis on where we are so far and what the Western powers are actually doing to try to combat Putin in this.
I think even a week ago, many of us thought, how can he possibly do this? All the signs were that it was being prepared, but it's still a shock when it actually starts. And it's a shock to the Russian people. I was myself in Moscow last week talking to a range of people, including many Russian counterparts, academics, analysts of security policy. And it's very striking to me this morning, the number of those people who are actually coming out publicly on Twitter and social media, all the people appearing in the streets of Russian cities protesting this action from President Putin. Many Russians really couldn't believe that President Putin would do this. They understood that he might want to threaten it, but to actually carry out this large-scale invasion of a fellow Slav nation is quite incredible. I think people are in shock in Russia and the people of Ukraine, of course. This is exactly what will make the Ukrainian people firmly committed to their own national identity and a definition of that national identity as opposed to Russia, which wasn't the case 10, 15 years ago before the 2014 invasion. Most Ukrainians wanted to be close to Russia as well as to the West.
That's not going to matter, is it, though? I mean, with the greatest of respect to them and their views, and obviously to Ukrainian sovereignty, it's not going to matter if President Putin continues on the path he's going, and it seems impossible to see at this stage how to stop him.
I think that's right. I think the next stage, everybody's anticipating, President Zelensky was anticipating this in his speech during the night. The next stage is likely to be a Russian attempt to impose a puppet government in Kyiv to overthrow President Zelensky himself. He's clearly under direct personal threat. But then what? Then what? The Russians have overwhelming military superiority. They are taking losses, but they will prevail in the conventional fight. But it's a bit like Baghdad in 2003. The Americans had a plan to defeat the Iraqi army, but then they faced a deep and vicious insurgency. And I think all the signs are that the Ukrainians are preparing for that protracted conflict. Russia does not have the military resources to occupy and control, to run Ukraine by itself. It will need many, many Ukrainians to be on its side. It's by no means clear that Ukrainians will be prepared to collaborate in that large-scale occupation. So I think Putin has the next step planned, but it's not at all clear that he has a step after that. And that's consistent with a president who's often seen as a clever tactician, but lacking in a real strategy. And I don't think he has a workable strategy here in Ukraine.
Do you think in this case, then, that he has actually miscalculated? I mean, already we're seeing protests on Moscow streets.
I think he's miscalculated. We shall see. But I think he has miscalculated the resolve and determination of the Ukrainian people, large swathes of the Ukrainian people prepared to fight. But also, I think he's misread public opinion. And, I think COVID has had something to do with this. Over the last couple of years, we've seen President Putin moving in this to a more extreme position from what he had before. And that's, I think, partly explained, many people at least think that's partly explained by the fact that he's been in such great isolation, even from his closest advisors, stuck in his palace in the Black Sea much of this time. Russia has had a much higher rate of COVID death. More than 1 million people died of COVID. Many of the leadership have been hospitalized, and President Putin himself, often seen as a bit of a Germanophobe, isolating himself in his palace and not listening to his advisors, not listening most of all to his economic advisors who would have told him of the likely consequences of sanctions, and he is just ignoring those consequences at this moment.
Professor Chalmers for the Royal United Services Institute. Good to talk to you.
Yes,
thank you
very much. Our viewers have been in touch. Thank you. Catherine says Europe is going to pay a long and heavy price for sitting back and watching Putin. Ukraine is a sovereign country, and saying we can't help because they're not part of NATO is nonsense. Because of fear, we are all, yes, UK as well, in for a long, expensive and bloody future. There is no such thing as ex-KGB, and Putin is a thug. Do not expect him to play a game.
For those of you feeling concerned, Phil's been in touch. I live on my own. Morning to you, Phil.
Morning.
And says, your constant scaremongering is making me feel frightened. Well, I can understand that, Phil, but what do we do?
We have to report the news, and unfortunately the news is bad.
We can't ignore it. But, I mean, I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah, Ginny says the same thing. She says, good morning. My granddaughter came for a sleepover yesterday. The first thing she said was, I'm worried about the war. She said she's worried about power cuts because she needs her Kindle. She's 11.
And interestingly, Paul And I think this is going to come up, Paul. I think this is an area which people are going to be pushing on. All the activists that stopped us from fracking and exploring for more oil and gas, look at the result. We should be promoting self-sufficiency. Well, energy security, as they call it, is very, very important. Of course, the focus is trying to do that in a sustainable manner, which, you know, does make sense. But certainly the fracking, the shale gas, I think is an area where a lot of people are going to be pushing pretty hard.
And may well
that.
change their minds. Who knows? When Sally said the average UK householder at the moment cannot afford this war, it's going to hit us in our pockets too.
Look, let's talk to senior lecturer in post-Soviet security at King's College London, Dr. Ruth Dermond. Good to see you this morning, Ruth. Again, we're in a very difficult situation where President Putin almost seems, we're getting the sense that he's determined to push on, and as Sally Livesley was saying, she thinks try to take the whole of Ukraine within a pretty short period of time. I mean, is that what you expect?
It's very hard to say, and I have to say, if that is what Putin is trying to do, then I don't see how that's realistic. I mean, I would absolutely echo what Professor Chalmers was just saying, that Russia, despite its obvious conventional superiority, doesn't really have the capability, doesn't have the resources to take and hold the whole of Ukraine in the face of a resistant population. I mean, Ukraine has a population of, 40 million people. It's geographically huge. The Russian army simply isn't equipped to deal with that in the long term.
But Ukraine does have a reputation for fighting, doesn't it? Really fighting hard in these situations. So it's a question I asked a minute ago, has President Putin misunderstood or miscalculated here?
To be honest, personally, and of course none of us know for certain, but personally I would say yes, he has. And you're right. I mean, one of the things that everybody who knows anything about Ukraine knows is its history in the Second World War. I think, one of the things that a lot of Russians are going to find very difficult to deal with in what's happening now is that Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, was one of the hero cities of the Soviet Union. It was one of the cities that resisted the Nazis and got a special status as a result. It was recognized as one of the great pillars of Soviet defense. And now that same city, that hero city of the Second World War, is being bombed by Moscow. And that's going to be a very hard thing, I think, for a lot of Russians, as well as a lot of Ukrainians, to tolerate, frankly.
It is interesting, isn't it, that there are, there are a lot of protests everywhere around the world at the moment against this Russian move, but there are also protests on the streets of Moscow. I mean, you think how incredibly brave those protesters must be. We've heard that there have been about 1,000 arrests. They are very brave to do so, but they are voicing a voice that seems to be from the ordinary Russian, that we don't want war.
Yes, absolutely. And you asked about miscalculation earlier. One of the things that we have to wonder about, I think, is whether Putin is assuming or was assuming that he would have a response similar to the one after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. And that was a move that was broadly popular amongst the Russian population because Crimea was seen by many people as always Russian. So perhaps he was expecting the same response, but this is absolutely not what seems to be happening. It doesn't seem to be popular. And as you say, if you think about the courage that it takes to go out onto the streets of Moscow or St. Petersburg or a lot of other cities across Russia and actually protest, you have to assume that for every one person who's protesting, there are a lot of other people sitting at home with the same view. So I think, I do wonder if Putin has miscalculated. And certainly what Professor Chalmers was saying about his isolation, about the effects of only being surrounded by a small group of people all saying the same thing. I wonder if we're seeing the effects of that. I have to say as well that I think one of your previous interviewees was talking about Putin acting. I'm not at all convinced that the irrationality that we've seen from Putin this week is an act. And to be honest, most of the analysts that I know are deeply concerned about his mental state.
Yeah, I have to say I've heard that from some sources as well. Look, Dr. Diamond from King's College, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. And coming up, we'll be hearing about Poland preparing for an influx of Ukrainian refugees.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, Poland is setting up reception centres and hospitals to deal with the expected rush of people fleeing the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Anna Alboth joins us from Minority Rights Group, which is based in the Polish capital, Warsaw. Hello there, Anna. Hi. Have you felt any of the effects yet? Have you seen any people crossing the border into Poland?
Yes, of course. Already yesterday and during the night, around 5,000 people crossed through 8 of the Polish border crossings.
I didn't realise it was so many so soon. You must be expecting more and quickly.
This is something that we were expecting already for some time. So all the Polish activists, different NGOs were getting ready all along the border. There are some reception places. A lot of local people come to help at the train station, bus stations. We expect much more people today in the next week.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to put a lot of pressure on Poland, though, isn't it? At a time when clearly the Polish government is very concerned about their own borders and their own security.
Yes, but people are showing extreme solidarity. A lot of people give blood donations. A lot of people offer their houses for the refugees. We gather information in different Polish cities where people can be received.
What sort of condition are these people in? Presumably they've been able to drive there in their cars. Have they been able to bring very much with them? Do they have money? Do they have access to money?
They are all in shock. It was the first day, so those who came were the ones who packed their stuff the fastest. It's mainly families with kids, with disabled people. They had to spend long hours on the borders. Right now there is on every border crossing around 10-12 kilometers traffic. But they are full of hope that Poland will help them right now.
I mean, and obviously it's not just Poland who's going to be dealing with this. A lot of the border countries are bracing themselves for an influx. I mean, the concern is, of course, that this isn't just going to be a temporary measure for a lot of these people.
Of course, but we also have to remember that the war was going on for the last 8 years, and we have already around 2 million refugees from Ukraine in Poland. So the infrastructure, universities, job centers, they are all already kind of prepared, which is a bit good sign.
The average family arriving, what are you able to do for them? Where can they go? What are you able to offer them?
At the reception centers, there is the medical support, food, and some basic clothes and blankets. And then Polish government will distribute people to different cities, to different shelters. For now, the situation is very surprising. So in schools, in culture centers, there are beds, and people can spend the first night there.
Is language a problem?
It's not a big problem. We already have a lot of Ukrainians and a lot of translators, and Polish language is not so far away from Ukrainian.
In terms, you mentioned all the children coming across and say putting beds in schools and things. I mean, there is going to be, at some point, you've got to start thinking about things like education and how to normalise it a little bit for children, how to reduce the trauma that they're going through.
Yes, the people who come already in the first days, of course, the trip was not easy for them, but most of them didn't experience very, very difficult situations now. I'm happy that Polish government decided to open the borders and people, even without proper passports, without documents, can enter. It's a very different situation than the last half a year on the Polish-Belarusian border, where Syrian or Afghan refugees were never let through.
And as well as being supported by government, are charities supporting you? And are there ways that people all around the world can actually support?
Yes, so I think all the NGOs dealing with the topic of migration are working together right now. Today and tomorrow we have a lot of coordination meetings to decide which organization can take care of which thing. Then we will be sending information to the world. How can you support?
Okay, Anna Albot, good to talk to you this morning, and you know,
well done in all you're doing.
Work. Yes. Yeah, it's going to go on for a long time, I fear. Thanks very much indeed. Stay with us here on GB News. Coming up, we're going to take you through the newspapers
after
a couple of minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
At 7:33, it's time for the papers on GB News, and we'll start with the Mirror. It shows a victim of the Ukrainian conflict bandaged following a raid on the city of Kyiv in northern Ukraine. Her blood, it says, is on Putin's hands.
The Daily Mail reports that Russian forces were closing in on Kyiv last night, saying Putin could seize the capital in days.
The Telegraph's top line says a new Cold War in Europe has begun following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Western powers have moved to isolate Russia economically and politically.
Well, it's time to go through what's inside the papers as well now. Joining us this morning, broadcaster Liz Kershaw and political commentator Benedict Spence. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Right, so we're going to start with you, Liz, and sanctions on Russia in the Daily Telegraph are useless.
Yeah, that's the headline. I'll just distill it into, three elements, really. We can say, we're going to stop cooperating on this, we're going to slap down restrictions on this, but at the end of the day, we are so dependent on Russia for raw materials, whether it's oil, gas, wheat. For instance, that 90% of Europe's imports of rapeseed oil come from Ukraine, which affects everything, including ham production in Spain, if you can't feed on. So we are so dependent, and we're not going to give up buying oil and gas and wheat, etc., from Russia. Meanwhile, Russia is sitting on £476 billion worth of foreign exchange reserves, so it's got money in the bank. It can ride it out. It has a national debt of 18% of GDP, one of the lowest in the world, and a huge fiscal surplus. And the third element is this money paying for things, bank exchanges, SWIFT, the system. Nobody's threatening to shut that down because in order to buy the oil and gas that Europe needs, it pays for it with SWIFT. So that's not going to be touched. So basically...
Well, to be fair, though, President Biden says he wants to go down the SWIFT route. Boris Johnson says he's keeping it on the table.
Yeah, but Biden and the Germans also were complicit in allowing the gas pipe to be built.
Stop.
Yeah, but
they've paused Nord Stream 2, but Nord Stream 1 is still there. It's still going. And of course, the key thing of all of this is Vladimir Putin will have built this into his strategy, knowing full well that he doesn't need Nord Stream 2 if he takes control of Ukraine's pipes, because then he doesn't have to pay for their usage. So actually, it's all a bit academic. The Germans, years after they should have done, pausing Nord Stream 2. It doesn't really make the biggest... But actually, if you look at the list of things that the European countries are sort of squabbling over, what can there be sanctions on? The Belgians don't want there to be sanctions on Russian diamonds, calcipries. The Italians don't want there to be sanctions on luxury goods. I wonder why. This is where you begin to see what should be a very powerful bloc acting in cohesion. It all begins to fall down. The Germans aren't very keen, as Liz says, on banking sanctions. The Italians are also very iffy about things that go into their railway system that Russia produces. Russia has relatively quite a small GDP, but it has geared its economy to be essential to the global system. And we had Imran Khan.
We're going to have to bite the bullet, aren't we? We're going to have to, and it's going to be very, very tough.
It's already tough. I mean, there's a shortage already of agricultural fertilisers. Without those, we can't grow. It's like, let's have food security, all well and good, but if you can't get the most out of your land because of lack of fertilisers, and microchips, there are rare earth metals that we need. The Russians do manufacture their own microchips. They're not the lower grade than ours, but they can.
But they do also need trade with us, don't they?
Well, they do. They've got trade with us because we are so dependent on gas, oil and grain.
The food stuff is particularly important. I mean, the Kenyan ambassador to the UN did a very powerful speech talking about how every former colonised African country could empathise with the Ukrainians and what's being happening to them. Kenya imports 40% of its wheat from Russia. It can't afford to feed its population without the agricultural fertilizers. Imran Khan was in Moscow yesterday, kowtowing to President Putin because his country can't feed itself without Russia. It's the same with India. It's the same with China. This isn't simply about trade. Food supplies, they are the lifeblood. That is actually the most important thing. And Russia has a stranglehold over most of the world's ability to produce them. That's really where they've got us.
Well, we allowed it to happen.
Absolutely, and this is, I'm afraid, this is the issue with globalization.
Yeah.
When times are good, globalization makes everybody very wealthy. But if you concentrate certain things in the hands of certain unsavory characters, they will use them against you.
Putin has been unsavory for years.
Again, we've allowed ourselves to sort of believe that it wouldn't happen. All of these sort of doomsday scenarios. A pandemic might happen. Oh yeah, sure, it might happen. Global warming. Oh yeah, that's a thing that'll come along the horizon. China will one day overtake the US. It might do. All of these things have been predicted.
Look, let me jump in.
Okay.
We're down to the last 2 minutes.
Oh, right,
here we go.
Wow.
Liz, let's talk about Partygate, but not number 10 Partygate, number 11.
Yeah, well, do you remember that? I wasn't here and we talked about it when Rishi Sunak basically washed his hands of Boris in a press conference and said, oh yes, he shouldn't have said that and he shouldn't have said this, and he was asked about being at a party and he said, oh, I may have looked out of the window, and I thought, you don't live hand to mouth next door to each. In fact, I think Boris's flat moved with number 11. So it's all one building really. So I thought, that's a bit smug, isn't it? And he was caught in popularity with the public to the extent where the public was saying, oh, if we get rid of Boris, which we should if he went to a party, we'll have Rishi Sunak as our Prime Minister. I was thinking, he can't get away with this, absolutely, whitewash himself. Anyway, he's now been handed a questionnaire and he's admitted he did go
under caution.
Yeah, and he accidentally went to a party.
So it happened to all of us accidentally.
But I just wanted to bring this up very quickly because I think
ambushed by a Victoria sponge.
Yeah. I think Putin's been watching this. It's a bigger issue. We'll talk about it in the next segment maybe. But it's a bigger issue. Putin's been watching the West beat itself up over Partygate, over gender realignment, over climate change, over Black Lives Matter,
wokery,
cancel statues, and he's been watching this. He didn't need to invade. We are self-imploding, I think.
I don't know. I think we're crediting Putin with too much.
He's been watching its credibility
at the moment. I think there are bigger issues at play with what's going on with him at the moment, to be perfectly honest. But anyway,
what?
Well, because he's been in such isolation for years that I think he's, our Defence Secretary said he's gone a bit tonto. And I think that may be the case.
Well, I don't...
That's belittling the situation.
I think that is a Western coping mechanism than we say Putin is a madman, because if he's a madman, inevitably he will fail. That's the idea, that there will be some divine intervention that will mean he fails, because mad people always do. I think that's a bad way to look at it.
There's a lot of intelligence.
I think there was a lot of intelligence about all sorts of things that fail quite badly.
Well, Hitler was a madman, but look how far he went.
Are we out of time? I think we just about are, so we'll catch up with you two a little bit later. I'll try and crack through some more stories next time.
Yeah.
You have to chat less, please.
Yes.
OK.
Yes, sir.
Let's go on Ukraine.
Let's turn our attention to matters closer to home. Should councils in southern England say there will be a tidal wave of homeless people over the next 2 years.
Apparently, families are being left without a home due to benefits freezes, soaring food and energy bills, as well as the end of COVID eviction bans.
Well, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation says this spring energy prices will hit single adult households on lower incomes the hardest, and they say low-income families may be forced into paying 54% of their incomes on bills, and they fear this could push them into becoming homeless.
Our South East of England reporter Ellie Costello visited a temporary accommodation shelter in Basildon in Essex.
This is Arn Court in Basildon. It's a short-term supported housing scheme for people who are homeless. There are 36 properties on site here. People can stay here for a few weeks to 6 months before a council house is found for them, or they move on to private rentals. There's concern here that demand for these services are only going to increase as the cost of living means more and more people are forced into homelessness. In April, energy bills alone will be up £700 on average for families. I spoke to the manager of Arn Court, Samantha Hampshire. And bills are going to go up on average about £700 per family. What does £700 mean for people here?
They don't have £700 extra on top of their kind of benefits or their low income at the moment, so it's going to be a case of them choosing to decide whether to heat their homes or eat. It really is that kind of cut and dry. They're already using food banks and things like that, so it really will they'll be cold, or they'll go without hot water, or decide whether they want food or heating for that week. A lot of our tenants are already on the top-up meters, so they're already at a disadvantage because the top-up meters are more expensive than having, say, a contract. So yeah, we'll definitely be relying on food banks and sort of donations. We've got donations of like shampoo, shower gels, food, clothing to try and help the people that are living here.
Will there be more demand for the services, do you think?
I believe so, yeah. We already see a lot of people come here that are, for example, in privately rented accommodation before they come here, and with the benefit caps or the reduction in their income, people that have lost their jobs, or the price of living and sort of private rent's gone up. They come here because they can no longer afford to stay in their current properties, and they get evicted because they can't afford to pay the rent.
I met Shannon, who is a single mum with 2 children who lives in Arn Court. She works in the local Poundland and earns minimum wage, but she fears that she won't ever be able to afford to privately rent again.
I think we're all exactly in the same boat. We're all worried about what's going to hit us, kind of thing, when we do get our places with money. It's just too hard for everybody. Don't matter how much you work, money goes nowhere, basically. Everything else has gone up apart from everybody's wages, so it is difficult. Yeah, it's scary, it is.
Crisis charities say the cost of living crisis is where people already under crippling financial pressure are edging closer to homelessness as they struggle to afford basic necessities like heating, eating and keeping a roof over their heads. To stop these warnings from becoming a reality, the government needs to invest in the local housing allowance so it truly covers the cost of rent across the country, alongside a strategy to deliver the genuinely affordable homes needed so that everyone has a place to call home. A Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities government spokesperson said that this year councils have been given an extra $65 million to support low-income households with rent arrears. We've also set up a £316 million homelessness prevention grant, which will help people who are homeless or at risk of losing their home to find a new one, get help with evictions or move into temporary accommodation. But for those like Shannon who are already in temporary accommodation, like here in Arn Court in Basildon, there are concerns for the future of the residents. They worry they won't ever be able to afford a home of their own again. Ellie Costello, GB News.
Let's have a look at the sport for you this morning. Paul Coit is here. Good morning. Paul, what have you got for us?
Well, really, it's a lot of reaction to what's going on with Ukraine at the moment. FIFA and UEFA and the Olympic Committee have all condemned Russia's actions, which is not really a surprise, although they were all very happy to stage events there over the past few years. But that's another story altogether. Scotland, due to play Ukraine in a World Cup playoff game, was supposed to happen at Hampden on March the 24th. In the grand scheme of things, you know, that's obviously something that's not going to happen. But then you're going to have FIFA that are going to be looking at it and thinking, well, we've got a World Cup in the head. And they're going to be thinking about this sort of thing. Gianni Infantino was given the Russian Order of Friendship. And also, this is the man who's in charge of FIFA that insisted that the whole situation would all be done and clear within a month.
Yeah, well, there you go.
That's what FIFA had to
How difficult is it to relocate some of these big
It shouldn't be too much of a problem, man, because we've got the Champions League final, which is supposed to happen in St. Petersburg, which is in May.
Wembley?
You'd think so. Wembley, although it turns out on that day, I think there's a playoff final. But the amount of stadia that we have in this country, Spurs stadiums hold 62,000. You've got West Ham is the same.
Get it up at MK Dons.
Hold it at MK Dons. That's going to be the place for it to go.
Perfect.
There's and also other things have been relocated as well as the Russian Grand Prix, which would have been in Sochi in September. Sebastian Vettel has said that absolutely won't go. He's going to be the first. There's going to be more, but I'm sure that's going to be moved in this, and that's probably going to go to Turkey.
What about Roman Abramovich and all his money and his 2 helicopter pads on his ship? Sorry, that really gets me. The idea of having a yacht is one thing, but having a yacht with 2 helipads on it.
OK, well, you've got to fly in and fly out at the same time. You need 2 pads, don't you?
Is his status going to be affected in any way, do you think?
This is another really interesting one, because to see whether his closeness with Putin is actually going to have any effect of what goes on in football.
Yes, they are very close, aren't they?
They are, and he's put, I think we're looking at about £2.1 billion into Chelsea Football Club since he's owned it, since the early 2000s. Now, if there's going to be sanctions against him, where does that leave Chelsea Football Club? There's a very interesting thing. My friend Martin Lipton from The Sun has written about this, and it's talking about carve-ups and basically saying that if Chelsea's sanctioned, that therefore the legal effect would affect actually supporters, because nobody is allowed to actually put money into something which is sanctioned. So if you're buying tickets, if you're buying shirts, it would then make what you're doing against the law as well. Now, the carve-up means that there would be exceptions in a situation like that.
Yes.
So, I mean, to actually do something to Chelsea Football Club, it's not going to happen. We know very well it's not going to happen. But how does that affect Roman Abramovich, therefore, and his ownership of Chelsea? Does he sell it? Does he have to walk away? Who's going to buy it? We're talking about billions of pounds. So really, that's all up in the air.
Does he have a personal affection for it? I mean, is he really...
I think he does. I think he does, because there's been a lot of time where he's been away and he hasn't been allowed to come back. You see the way he reacts with Chelsea, and Chelsea wins. He's very happy. He gets very excited like a fan would. But is that how an owner would react? I don't know. And also, it's got to be a labour of love, because this is not something, surely, that he's going to make a lot of money out.
No, why otherwise would he have bought it in the
He's
first
just putting
place?
so much money in it. But, of course, someone like him can afford it.
So if you were deprived of it, it might hurt. That's all I was wondering.
Let's have a look at Djokovic, should we? No longer world number one.
Yeah, interestingly, it's a Russian now that's taken over as well, and that's Daniil Medvedev. So this is the first time that it's someone outside the big four of Murray and Federer and Nadal and Djokovic has actually been number one on the world tennis rackets for 18 years.
Why is Nadal number one?
Sorry?
I would have thought Nadal would be number one.
But Nadal hasn't been playing because he... Oh, no, Nadal... No. Of course, I'm thinking of Federer. Nadal... didn't win the Australian. Oh no, he did.
No, he did win the
Australian.
Australian. That's why I thought he would be number one now.
Yeah, sorry, it's not just when it comes to the major events. There's so many different events. Whereas Daniil Medvedev, you're still getting points for second. You're still getting points all the way through.
And Rafa hasn't played.
He hasn't played as many because he was injured earlier on in the season.
Can we talk Six Nations?
Yes.
I'm particularly interested in England and Wales.
Yeah, England and Wales.
Very interesting.
Why are you particularly interested?
Because there's a royal connection there, isn't there?
There is the royal connection, of course, to both sides, yeah, because there could be an argument between
William and
there.
Catherine.
Catherine, who's now in charge or the figurehead of English rugby, and then you've got William, who's obviously Wales. 4:45 kickoff, that's tomorrow. Always a huge, huge game. Wales haven't beaten England in Twickenham. That's since the World Cup of 2015. So that is going to be a very, very
it's going to be chilly weather for them.
It really is. Scotland play France. Could go either way. France are probably going to be favourites, but playing at Murrayfield, and then Ireland play Italy. Really, unfortunately, when you look at Italy, it's just a matter of how many points anybody's going to score against them, because they're looking at bonus points. But you never know. But playing against Ireland in Ireland, you can't really give them any hope, I'm afraid.
Paul Coit, thank you. Look, talking about royal connection, let's talk to Angela Levin, who knows. If there's something royal going on, Angela knows about it. Good to see you this one. There's lots to talk about. But can we just have a word about William and Kate?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
William and Kate and that combo, because they're a competitive couple, aren't they?
They are very competitive. We've seen them race against each other. We've seen them playing in boats against each other, and this time they'll be after each other's team. What I'm interested in is who of them is going to take Prince George there, because he loves football and
He'll sit
rugby.
in between them.
No, there's a distant. No, I don't think so. I don't think they'll sit together. I don't think so. I mean, they might get really cross and hyper, and I think they love that sort of competition.
George will swap over at half-time.
Oh, that's a good idea. So you've saved the day. But I think it will be lovely because they seem to be so buoyant at the moment and so full of laughter. We saw Kate go round a slide.
Well, they're sincere in their enthusiasm, aren't they?
Exactly. Yes, you don't think it's phony. And they make each other laugh, and that's a very nice thing to see. And I think if one scores, that the other one will go, and it'll be very good for the cameras to catch it.
They love their sport, don't they, the royal family? Because when you think of it, you think when the Queen's horse wins, particularly if it's at
Ascot.
Thank you, that's it, Ascot. She does the same thing.
Yes, it's the one time you see her absolutely animated.
Yes.
Totally animated.
How is she at the moment? Because she is still delaying or postponing at least some of her video engagements.
Yes. Well, I think we don't have to worry too much. I was concerned that she wouldn't be well enough to talk to the Prime Minister yesterday, but she did do this. They had a telephone call of the usual time, I'm told. And so So she couldn't be that bad, because otherwise she wouldn't want to do it. But I've also heard that with these sort of flu-like symptoms, that you often get a croaky voice. And I think that could be one reason why she actually doesn't want to go video-wise. And if she stopped yesterday and today, she's then got the weekend, and so she might be better next week, because she very, very much wants to be part of the diplomatic reception on Wednesday. She wants to go. She's been told, I'm told, that she can't stay for very long, but she does actually want to be there. It's very important to her to be there. So I think that will be...
What is the diplomatic reception for?
Yes. Well, I think she does it every year, you know, just to say thank you and for everyone to come along. And actually this year it's changed from white tie to something less sort of grand, although the duchesses will wear their tiaras.
Right.
So it's quite important.
And she's going to be absolutely across the international situation at the minute, isn't she?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very difficult for her.
But that's why it's also very important for her to be seen there, really.
But it's her whole life.
Somebody in charge of the country, really.
Yeah, it's her whole life to be strong and to be there and to meet people from all around the world, and that's what she likes best. She loves it.
So at the moment, we shouldn't worry.
Well, I think you should worry, really, but not totally. I think you worry about anybody who's nearly 96, who's not been well. And, you know, we've seen that her body is much less able to move than it was before. And, you know, you have to keep moving your body, really, as well.
But then that is normal as long as she is well. I mean, it's very normal, isn't it?
Yes, and also her emotional place. She's good at departmentalising everything, so she puts them in boxes. But if she's on her own a lot, or not with very many people, she's bound to feel very low with the loss of Prince Philip. You know, anyone would after 70 years.
But I can imagine at the moment the staff looking after her are being as strict as they can be with her, which is restricting. I mean, video calls is something that she can postpone until next week.
Yes.
Give her as much chance of arrest as
She is
possible.
looking through her red boxes every day, so she is up to date with everything that's going on and signing them. You know, that's a thing you can do in your dressing gown, isn't it?
This is true.
I hope she
This is true,
does.
with the hot water bottle.
Yeah, I hope she does.
Nice cup of tea.
Yeah,
Looking after... Oh, gin and Dubonnet.
Oh, I think
Well, not
that's
all
later
day.
in the day.
Oh, I don't
Yes.
know. Angela, good to see you.
Yes,
Thanks
thank
very
you very much indeed. And don't forget to get in touch with us and tell us how you're coping at the moment. We know it's all bad news. What else can we do but report it? We'll try and keep a smile on your face as well at the same time. But let us know how you're coping with your family, how you're answering youngsters' questions about the present situation. It's very difficult. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
We've got plenty more to come for you, including, of course, the very latest on the situation in Kyiv. Stay with us. But first, let's have a look at the forecast.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Following yesterday's cold winds and wintry showers, it is a freezing start in places this morning. Frost and ice about, but plenty of sunshine, and it's looking like a decent day as high pressure builds in from the southwest. That's going to kill off the wind and the showers this morning, and it will lead to plenty of sunshine for at least a few hours in most places. So a bright start to the day, still 1 or 2 showers coming through the Irish Sea coast and northwest England, the Midlands, for example. Otherwise, they tend to ease during the morning. By this afternoon, plenty of sunshine breaking out, and with lighter winds compared to yesterday, it will feel pleasant enough in that sunshine. Temperatures reaching 10 or 11 Celsius in Cardiff, Southampton, London, Plymouth, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8s and 9s. But for Western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, cloud and some outbreaks of rain move in by the end of the afternoon, falling as snow over the Scottish mountains. That moves through, but it stays cloudy for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, and increasingly breezy tonight and through the early hours of Saturday. Also breezy for western coasts of England and Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells, lighter winds, a touch of frost, 1 to 3 Celsius in the southeast, whereas for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 6 and 7 Celsius because of the breeze and because of the cloud. Mostly, Saturday is looking like a dry day. There'll be plenty of sunshine for England and Wales, hazy sunshine at times with some high cloud in the sky. But thicker cloud for Scotland and Northern Ireland, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle at times, mainly over Western Hills, and increasingly windy, risk of gales for the Western Isles as well as for Shetland. That breeze, though, coming in from the south will allow temperatures to reach 9 or 10 Celsius in most spots. Sunday sees an area of rain move in from the west. This will be heavy at first for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. It'll move through into central areas and tend to weaken.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Multiple explosions rock Ukraine for a second night, leaving residential buildings ablaze. This is the scene this morning of some of the damage.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Friday the 25th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne. We're live across the UK on your TV and your radio, of course. Here is what you're waking up to this morning.
Well, Ukraine's foreign minister says Kyiv has been hit by rocket strikes overnight as the country's air defences apparently shoot down a Russian aircraft.
President Vladimir Zelensky pleads for help from the West, saying, "Who is ready to fight alongside us? I don't see anyone." He added that the Russian invasion has already led to 137 deaths.
Meanwhile, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has revealed a package of further EU sanctions against Russia.
If you want to let us know your views on the situation in Ukraine, then email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @GBNews.
So, of course, the situation in Ukraine is dominating our coverage today. As you would expect, the Russian attack on Ukraine continued through the night. We know that Kyiv was bombarded by several explosions through the night, and it's claimed at least that one aircraft was shot down, which then crashed into a building and set that ablaze as well. So there's been a lot going on, a lot to get concerned about. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has been monitoring everything. Mark, what's the very latest?
Good morning to you both. Yes, indeed, the information that's coming out from the Ukrainian military this morning does not look good at all. President Zelensky overnight reporting that this is going to be the most difficult day. It was a terrible day yesterday with 137 Ukrainian losses. And the sirens, the air raid sirens, sounded in the capital Kyiv overnight. about 4 a.m. In Ukrainian time, the siren sounded. And people then heard very significant thuds, missile strikes. We're seeing these residential areas of Kyiv now. This footage that's been circulating from the Reuters news agency, which is now verified as coming from the Ukrainian capital. There are also shots of an aircraft which has apparently been shot down. Now, the claim is that this is a Russian aircraft, but we've no way of verifying that is the case. Again, there's a lot of disinformation out there. But as I say, President Zelensky preparing the people of Ukraine for a very difficult day today with the belief of the Russian or the Ukrainian authorities, I should say, that the Russians intend to move on Kyiv today.
Mark, just in the last few minutes, we're getting word from Russia's defence ministry, and they're commenting on radiation levels in Chernobyl. They're saying, the radiation levels in the power plant are normal at the moment. Well, I mean, that's a relief in and of itself. But there is concern, isn't there, that those Russian troops have headed to Chernobyl on their way to Kyiv?
Yeah, I mean, when the news came through yesterday about this, I think lots of people were scratching their heads initially as to why on earth they would want the scene of this 1986 disaster with very high radiation levels all around there in an exclusion zone. The simple fact of the matter is that it's actually the most direct route to Kyiv, which is why people in the Ukrainian capital are now so worried. And it seems that Russia is in control of the area around the Chernobyl nuclear plant. So they're trying to put out reassuring messages in terms of the decommissioning process that is underway at that plant. They say that will continue as normal, so they are not, they claim, going to risk any kind of further radiation leakage. But they obviously want to control that area as a direct route to the capital itself. We have heard this morning, and I know you'll be on your show a little later this morning, from Ben Wallace, who's been speaking, the UK Defence Secretary, about the situation. Now, he is of the belief from all of the intelligence that's coming into the United Kingdom that Russia failed to meet its first day objectives. And the information they have is that some 450 Russian troops have been killed. And one key objective was to try to take a military airport that is on the outskirts of Kyiv. And the reason that this is so important is because, again, according to the intelligence picture being assessed by the UK and the US, the Russians wanted to use that as a base to move personnel in so they could take over the capital. Well, the Ukrainians, we understand, put up a very fierce fight, even though hundreds of Russian paratroopers landed at that airport. They have either been beaten back or at least are not in control of the airport in any meaningful way. In other words, it's not safe enough for Russia to move significant numbers of forces into that airport. But expect more fighting around that airport and indeed Kyiv today.
I mean, there are very big questions, Mark, as to what more the West can do at this stage. President Zelensky crying out for help, really, in that broadcast he made during the night. Yet the West at the moment, just on NATO, doesn't seem to be in a position where it is able to do anything. I mean, certainly, it does open up a whole new problem if they start to engage.
Yeah, I mean, they feel very alone, understandably, because that's exactly what they are. They are trying to deal with a full-scale, it seems, military invasion being launched by Russia, thousands of troops making incursions into their territory. And because they're not a NATO ally, the West is not going to engage the Russian military on Ukrainian soil. It's just not going to happen. They have provided, of course, lethal aid in terms of missile systems in recent weeks. There have been British soldiers on the ground there training their Ukrainian counterparts, but they have now left the country. Ben Wallace suggesting this morning that they may still be in a position to try to get some more lethal aid into Ukraine, but it won't be UK boots on the ground. But others argue, that, OK, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, but it is a Western democracy that is crying out for help. And perhaps there is a moral imperative to go in there and to help them. But I guess that's a question you can put to Ben Wallace later.
Yeah, that's certainly a question that a lot of our viewers are bringing up right now. Mark, thanks very much indeed. Actually, we've just been handed a readout of a statement from Downing Street, because the Prime Minister has been speaking to President Zelensky this morning. But it basically doesn't say anything more than the Prime Minister assuring the Ukrainian President that the world is united in its horror at what Putin is doing, and that we are committed to provide further UK support to Ukraine in the coming days, and that we want to demonstrate that Putin cannot act with impunity. But it's really no more than that. So it must have been one of those phone calls that probably left President Zelensky saying the same thing. Are you just going to stand by whilst this happens?
Interesting. It's bringing up so many different issues, this, that you're thinking about, and it's why it's really good to get your thoughts, because so many different views are coming forward. Peter has got in touch and said, don't know if this topic has come up yet, but in recent years there's been such a push in the UK to dismantle Trident, our nuclear deterrent from the time of the Cold War. With protests against its upkeep, particularly from Scotland. I wonder if anyone's changed their mind about that with recent developments.
Steve says, my parents, as teenagers in 1956, experienced the same invasion when Russia attacked Hungary in 1956. No one came to their aid. They escaped to Austria, were then accepted as refugees in England. It was horrible, and I really feel for the people of Ukraine now.
Peter's been in touch and said it's no coincidence that China's on manoeuvres over Taiwan while the Russian situation develops, as they both fancied a pop. The sanctions will push Russia closer to China. And then he says, this is clever, ironically, Putin's mistake is not incurring the wrath of the West, it's the mistake of inevitably making Russia a vassal state of China.
It could result in all sorts of things that nobody's really thought of. Anne says, what's the point of NATO, UN, USA, EU supposedly supporting each other if they're leaving Ukraine to be invaded? This man will not stop once he achieves his goal in Ukraine. It appears Germany is still thinking of money and themselves.
Well, keep your thoughts coming through. GBviews at gbnews.uk. It's fascinating, all these different areas that you bring up for discussion. It's all things that we do need to be thinking about. So we really welcome your thoughts on that this morning.
Meanwhile, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warned that Putin must and will fail, announcing sanctions targeting 70% of the Russian banking market. Well, for more on this, we're joined by Valery Morokov, political analyst and Russian exile, who previously worked for the Kremlin, and he's joining us in the studio now. Are you impressed by the latest round of sanctions? Do you think they will have any effect?
I think that there are some sanctions that would be supported even by 99% of Russians. Say, for example, sanctions against corrupted officials or corrupted business. But at the same time, there are sanctions that are, let us put it like this, strange, and they paying back against Western Europe and the UK more than against Russia.
You mean strange in that they will cause damage to
damage to
those,
not only
those
damage,
bringing in
but
the sanctions?
much more damage to, say, for example, to the UK than to Russia. Let me give you as just one example, say, for example, but there are a lot of examples like this. When I came here 10 years ago, the difference between the prices in Russia and in the UK for gas and electricity was 2-3 times. So it was okay because there was a lot of export to Russia. Russia was importing even food. It was one of the biggest importers of food because Russian farmers, they were unable to get access to the Russian retails and shops, which owned by joint ventures of foreign companies even. And 80% of farmers were against Putin and his policy. Then came sanctions. Food export was sanctioned, so Russian farmers got access. They started developing. Now Russia is the biggest exporter of food and, for example, grains.
Yeah.
But in 2020, the difference between the prices in Russia for gas and electricity and the UK reached 7-8 times. In 21, end of 21, it was 1 to 30.
Crumbs.
And nobody takes into consideration that then it is going on, this process. And I've received, say, for example, a letter from the supplier that in April this price will go 75% up. But at the same time, with all these inventions and sanctions, the prices in any case are going up.
But it's like something has to be done. I mean, it's very difficult to understand, despite the international condemnation and all the pressure which he knew there would be, why Putin decided to start a war.
That's what I'm saying. First, the biggest problem is that the Western Europe does not understand that Russia is a different civilization. You understand that China is different, Indian is different, but you think that Russia is just the same, a little bit different, or a little bit strange. Let us put it like this. The same Russians are thinking about Western Europeans, but in reality, it's absolutely different thinking, mentality, and a different civilization, different history. So I'm not ruling out that in Kremlin they will understand well how to use the sanctions. It was used the same thing against Ukraine. Ukraine was buying gas, for example, for $200 per 1,000 cubic meters. Then they stopped buying the Russian gas and directly from Russia. They started buying through Europe, and they're paying 1,400.
We talk economics, we talk numbers and monetary figures, but isn't it interesting that there are even protests against this war on the streets of Moscow?
Yes, of course, there are a lot of people who are against the war just because of the war.
Well, that's
because
right.
The war against between Russia and Ukraine. But at the same time, a lot of Russians, they understand and they feel negative feelings they have against the present regime in Ukraine. First, and the second against their ideology, this nationalistic, radical nationalism. Why against? Because there were a lot of feelings that in 2014 that Ukraine might be success, with this Maidan and all these things. I had a lot of friends and I have friends in Ukraine. I visited at that time there, but it actually became more corrupted and unsuccessful state. The living standard in Ukraine is 3 times lower than in Russia.
But it still has the right to self-determination.
Yes, but the thing is that you should take into consideration the history, because radical nationalism and Soviets, including Ukrainian Soviets, even Ukrainians, not always Russia, Ukraine, no. Actually, that was Ukrainian soldiers, Soviet soldiers. They were fighting the Second World War, and it was ruthless fighting.
And isn't Putin still fighting the Cold War?
What do you mean by Cold War? This was ideological war. Now there is no ideology. Putin has constructed, still constructing capitalism.
Well, a very different sort, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
Political games.
Yes,
okay.
and you could argue endlessly too. It could go on and on.
Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. Let's talk to Colonel Richard Kemp, former chairman of COBRA, who joins us now. Morning to you. Look, we're almost, from an international perspective, from a British perspective, stuck between a rock and a hard place here, aren't we? I mean, we can see what the government is trying to do, but in terms of actual assistance, we're struggling, aren't we?
Well, we've provided a great deal of military assistance to Ukraine in the build-up to this conflict, including training thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and equipping them with thousands of anti-tank missiles. You could argue, and I would, that we didn't do enough, but we did a lot more than most countries did. And I think now we're in a situation where we we need to continue to provide military equipment to the Ukrainian army to enable them to keep fighting. And that should be equipment of all types. Whatever they need, they should get from us. Now, that's not an easy thing to say, given that the Russians control large parts of Ukraine, including Ukrainian airspace.
Yeah,
so we would need to establish an air corridor to bring in the supplies.
Forgive me, Colonel, for jumping in, but doesn't that cause... I mean, it's one thing to supply equipment before a conflict, to supply during a conflict. Doesn't that, in effect, tie us in a little bit closer? I mean, in terms of, you know, we can't start shooting at Russians at this stage. I mean, it's not far from it, is it?
Well, I agree. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's a dangerous thing to do, but we should be ready to do it. We've got a democracy and a friend of Britain that's under attack without provocation, and, you know, risks being destroyed as an independent sovereign state. We should do what we can to help. And yes, I agree with you. It is in effect, it is an act of aggression against Russia to supply Russia's enemies with weapons. But this is nevertheless an illegal war, and we're on the Ukrainian side. So yeah, we should do it. I don't suppose we will, and I don't suppose any EU country will either, because they're too frightened of invoking Russia's wrath.
So if we don't provide an air corridor, we will supply them over land?
If we can, yes. I think however we can do it, it's a complex problem and it's a difficult situation. But if we can do it, we should, to help them to continue fighting. And we should also, of course, provide them with financial support as much as they need, with intelligence, with surveillance, with cyber war, as we have been doing up to now. That should continue and increase as far as we possibly can. And I think, in other words, anything short of actually deploying British forces to attack the Russian army, I think we should do.
We are going to be looking, potentially, aren't we, if this continues? I mean, we're already, as you well know, sending troops to those NATO border countries. They could, in effect, end up being there for quite some time, couldn't they? This could be an ongoing process to try and secure those NATO borders.
I would have thought it would be a permanent process, perhaps until the regime changes in Moscow, at least, assuming that a more moderate and reasonable leader takes over in Russia at one stage. But yeah, I think this is a full-time commitment now, or permanent commitment that NATO will face, including Britain. And it needs to be a large one, because there's no point in just deploying a small number of forces there and hoping that the worst isn't going to happen. I think we have to deploy in considerable strength.
In the meantime, one of our viewers, Diana, says sanctions seem to be such a long-term strategy. Can't something more immediate be done right now?
I agree with you, and I think it is a long-term strategy, and it's a strategy that has not deterred Putin. Not only is it are sanctions something that don't have an immediate bite, usually, but also the sanctions that are being agreed by the EU are very weak, in my opinion. They may be stronger than we've seen before, they're still very weak. And that's because the EU, of course, is terrified of doing too much damage to its own economies. And that's a judgment that really only they can make. And it amounts to a form of appeasement against Russia. Don't annoy Russia too much, and they won't have a go at us in economic terms. So, but it's right that sanctions are not going to cut it. The other military measures I mentioned will be immediately effective if they can be brought in. And we should also be considering every measure we can take against Russia to turn it into a pariah, to isolate it. For example, why don't we expel the Russian ambassador from Britain, cut off diplomatic relations between Russia and EU countries? These are the sort of relatively hard measures that would have some effect. Again, they won't stop the fighting, but looking at the longer term, they might deter a recurrence of this sort of action by Putin. The key thing, I think, is to make this as tough as we possibly can for Putin, to make it as difficult for him to be able to proclaim that he's had a victory without great cost to himself.
OK, Colonel Richard Kemp, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay with us because we have plenty more to come. First of all, though, your Friday forecast.
Hello again, I'm Ada McGivern. Following yesterday's cold winds and wintry showers, it is a freezing start in places this morning, frost and ice about, but plenty of sunshine, and it's looking like a decent day as high pressure builds in from the southwest. That's going to kill off the wind and the showers this morning, and it will lead to plenty of sunshine for at least a few hours in most places. So a bright start to the day, still 1 or 2 showers coming through the Irish Sea coast and northwest England, the Midlands, for example. Otherwise, they tend to ease during the morning. By this afternoon, plenty of sunshine breaking out, and with lighter winds compared to yesterday, it will feel pleasant enough in that sunshine. Temperatures reaching 10 or 11 Celsius in Cardiff, Southampton, London, Plymouth, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8s and 9s. But for Western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, cloud and some outbreaks of rain move in by the end of the afternoon, falling as snow over the Scottish mountains. That moves through, but it stays cloudy for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, and increasingly breezy tonight and through the early hours of Saturday. Also breezy for western coasts of England and Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells, lighter winds, a touch of frost, 1 to 3 Celsius in the southeast, whereas for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 6 and 7 Celsius because of the breeze and because of the cloud. Mostly, Saturday's looking like a dry day. There'll be plenty of sunshine for England and Wales, hazy sunshine at times with some high cloud in the sky. But thicker cloud for Scotland and Northern Ireland, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle at times, mainly over western hills, and increasingly windy, risk of gales for the Western Isles as well as for Shetland. That breeze, though, coming in from the south will allow temperatures to reach 9 or 10 Celsius in most spots. Sunday sees an area of rain move in from the west. This will be heavy at first for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. It'll move through into central areas and tend to weaken.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning again. Time is 8:26, and obviously we are bringing you everything we can today on the Ukraine situation because it's important and because it is in the news. I do apologise hugely, though, for people who are finding it all a bit much. We do too. It's terrible at the moment to talk about something that's so depressing. Yeah, it is. And I've been wondering as well how you manage that news to young people at the moment who are very worried about headlines that talk about World War III and politicians that use the rhetoric about this is going to be the worst war that you've ever seen since the last World War. And I just wonder how you manage that news to young people at the moment who are very worried. War anxiety, I suppose you'd call it. If you know how to manage it, or you can tell us how you're managing managing it in your family, then drop us a line, gbviews@gbnews.uk. It's something I think that's worrying us all.
It is. It's just very hard to get your head around, isn't it, exactly what's going on.
So who is this President Putin? What sort of a man is he? Does his background affect the way he is behaving now? Would it help if we understood what he's about? Here to give us a profile of Mr. Putin is psychologist Dr. Pam Spur. Hello, Pam.
Good morning.
Hello. I understand from everything I've been reading about him that he is quite a character because he came from a very, very poor background, pulled himself up by his own bootstraps, I suppose, and rose through the KGB, only to find that, of course, the KGB crumbled underneath him when the Berlin Wall fell. Does that add to the character of the man who may be trying to rebuild Russia, the old Russia now?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you raise his childhood because in his autobiography or his biography, I'm not quite sure which, there's 10 years left out of his early childhood because of his uncertain parentage. Now, any child born without true knowledge of who their parents are often struggles with that. It can make them very insecure. And in some cases, when you add in what is called the dark triad of personality traits, it can make them feel they have to prove to the world that they are not an abandoned child, but that they are someone. And so when I say the dark triad of personality traits, it's what psychologists refer to for psychopathy, narcissism, and also Machiavellianism. And from his behavior and actions, and having looked at so many of his interviews over the years, you can see these traits in action within Putin. And these are, they're called the dark triad because they reflect a dark core in someone's personality. So if you take just the narcissism, whenever he appears, he is impeccably groomed. Even though he doesn't have much hair, his hair is trimmed perfectly. He often walks on his own because he's aware of his short stature. He wears impeccable, often form-fitting suits that show off the physique he's very proud of. And he often surrounds himself by flags, gold leaf, drama, big curtains, as we see right now on screen. So that's the narcissism coming through. But what's more troubling than narcissism, everybody has a little bit of narcissism, is the psychopathy, where over the last few decades, he has behaved in a psychopathic manner. He has ignored what the world would expect from an international leader. He has run roughshod over Blair, over Obama. When you look at his behavior, say, in Chechnya, and what he did to Grozny, where that was the most described as the city that was the most destruction in the entire world. That is so psychopathic to want to hammer a city down to nothing. So that psychopathy runs throughout his character. Then we have the Machiavellian streak. Only this week, he was gaslighting his own country, saying that Russia was under attack from the Ukraine. He was trying to gaslight the world. And it's very incredibly manipulative, the way he behaves like that. So it's a very worrying personality to deal with. Undoubtedly, because he also is incredibly controlling, there's a very fragile and chaotic ego, because those who are over-controlling are trying to control the chaos within. And the very worrying reports that you will have heard this morning, and the rest of the world, is how even those close to him are very concerned about recent outbursts rather than the tightly controlled person he is, as if he's losing it. So we are dealing with someone who's incredibly difficult to deal with.
Pam, there are these reports that are emerging that he has, during COVID, where it's been particularly bad in Russia, despite some reports to the contrary, that he's been locked away pretty much. He's spent the best part of a year seeing very, very little of anybody else. So, not getting company, not getting advice, not having his, the usual support network around him, if you like. With someone with the traits you describe, is that going to make things worse?
Absolutely, because isolation, when there's not even a tiny smidgen of other voices, will certainly just make these traits become even stronger within him. Because isolation means that he will not have heard any other opinions or voices. And you even saw it when he had Macron over recently, or Macron, sorry, my pronunciation, Macron. He had him 20 meters away because Macron would not take a Russian test. So that extreme behavior, when most of us have been saying, well, a meter away is fine when you don't know if someone's ill or not, but 20 meters, or sorry, 5 meters, I think it was, 20 feet or whatever. So yeah, that isolation would only fuel the obsessional thinking that he has. Because again, people close to him have said how obsessive he is about dominating Ukraine again, that he sees as the historical heart of Russia. So that obsessing, I know working with people who have obsessive compulsive disorder, that obsessional thinking, if you're isolated, grows more and more and more, and it's very hard to dampen it down.
Honestly, Pam, the more you describe him in those terms, the more you can't help thinking that's how you would have described Hitler at the time. And it took sheer force to defeat Hitler because he went ahead with everything he wanted to do. And Putin feels the same way. He's just going to go ahead with what he's decided, and nothing can stop him.
Yeah, nothing can stop him but death, basically. And so this is why world leaders, we all say, well, why are they not doing more? Because of the fragile ego. They will know this. They will have psychologists having given them profiles. Expert forensic psychologists will have been talking to world leaders. How do you deal with this personality? And a fragile ego will lash out like a bully if they are pushed. And this is why the world is in this terrible, precarious place.
It's terrible that he got there in the first place, isn't it? Thank you so much, Pam, for talking to us this morning, frightening though that is.
It is. It's very interesting, though, isn't it? And it will be all getting worked into the analysis that all those in power are looking at, I'm sure. Look, we're going to be looking at that situation in more detail before too long, but I just want to turn our attention to something else a little bit closer to home, and that is MPs debating a bill which could increase the minimum age for marriage and civil partnerships to 18. Let's talk to our reporter Alice Porter, who's outside Parliament for us this morning. What is the reason behind this, Alice? Why is this being debated?
Hi there, good morning. Yes, the reason that this is being debated in the House of Commons today is there is concern from campaigners across the country that there are children who are being coerced into marrying people, often who are much older themselves. And so this parents' permission for 16 and 17-year-olds is actually ending up in some cases as parental coercion. Now, somebody who knows very much about this issue is Paisley Mahmood, who survived child marriage and is an ICRO campaigner. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, you were married at the age of 16. Just tell me how that changed your life.
Well, it had a very devastating impact on my life. It affected my education, of course, my mental health, and I was in a situation where I didn't want to marry that person. I didn't even know what marriage was, and I had no idea about the consequences that were long-lasting and really, really impacted me. To this day, it's a huge trauma that I'm still recovering from.
Now, we were talking earlier about your kind of amazement, really, that when you were going through the wedding process, that nobody really recognised that what was taking place was forced marriage to a child, to somebody who was over double your age.
Yes, exactly. I was going to wedding shops with my parents, and I was, going to a registry office. I had both a registered and a non-registered cultural marriage. And for me, every single adult I came across, even my teachers, found that completely normal. And I just find that insane. No 16-year-old, no child should be in that position. They should be given the freedom and the space to actually fulfill their full potential.
Now, just how widespread is this issue? Because a couple of hundred children get married every year in the UK, but there are concerns that the real number is much higher for people who are getting married, and as you were saying, in religious ceremonies that are sort of separate to ones that are legally recognised. I mean, in lockdown, for example, I know you said you had a lot of people contacting you on social media who were worried about being forced into marriages as young teenagers.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the lockdown, the issue was was that young girls and young people were not going to schools and places of education, so they're at home and a lot more at risk of going through child marriage. And I was getting contacted by people who are so worried that this is going on, and this was completely legal under the current law. That's why this bill is so important. Not only does it address the registered marriages that are taking place, but it also addresses any type of marriage, whether it's religious, it's cultural, any type of marriage.
Well, Paisley, thank you so much for joining me here outside Parliament. This will be debated later on today. This is Pauline Latham. This is a bill that she has put forward, which would raise the minimum age for people to be married in England and Wales to 18 without any parental permission for people getting married younger.
Thanks very much indeed. Yeah, it's fascinating. An hour ago, when we were talking about the same subject, I was saying, do get in touch with us if you are watching now and you were married at 16 or 17, and we haven't had anyone call in yet.
Not yet.
Please do. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
I've had one tweet from Enjoy Brexit. Morning to you.
Hello.
It says 18 is the right age to get married.
18.
Well, at least as a minimum age.
Yeah.
I would agree.
I would have thought so. 16, you're still a child. 17, you're still a child. 18, we deem that nowadays you're an adult. I'm not sure if you are yet.
I'll be 48 when I get married. About
Yeah,
48.
Well, you've waited a good length of time, you see.
Just about,
Should work,
just about
shouldn't
ready
it?
now. Stay with us, because we've got lots more to come, including, of course, the very latest on the situation in Kyiv and Ukraine.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is 8:41, time to go through the papers then this morning, and we're going to turn our attention away a little bit from the main news of the day. We need to
give us all a breath of air, I suppose.
We do need it, don't we? Broadcaster Liz Kershaw and political commentator Benedict Spencer here. Morning once again, you two.
Good morning.
Our Elizabeth. Let's look at the Telegraph, shall we?
Yeah. Well, Angela was in earlier talking about the Queen and royal matters, but this story's about the Cambridges, William and Kate, and their imminent trip to the Caribbean.
When are they going?
They're going on a week-long visit to Jamaica, the Bahamas and Belize next month.
Oh, how lovely.
And it says the tours of the Caribbean come at a crucial time as Commonwealth islands increasingly debate whether to follow Barbados in severing ties with Britain and the monarchy. It's much vaunted when, Barbados, you know, it's gone independent, it wants to be a proud, separate state. The truth is, and this is why this is happening, that Barbados was lent I think it was £500 million to repair its infrastructure, which, if you've been there, I was there last in 2017, it's really crumbling now, you know, the roads, the hospitals, the public buildings and everything else. And Britain, although we're in the Commonwealth, has seriously failed to invest in Commonwealth countries. And now along comes China with its huge chequebook, as it's done in Africa, where it lends money to states to build things like dams and schools, and then these countries can't make the repayments. China knew that. China wades in and just takes ownership of these. So it's like occupation, takeover by stealth. And that's what happened with Barbados. And that's what I think is feared for the rest of our important allies, friends, strategic islands in the Caribbean. And that's what this visit's all about. That's why it's important. It ties in really with the way that Russia and China are taking over countries without even having to, you know, fire a bullet.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Fair point.
I flummoxed you there, haven't I?
Well, no, but I mean, I know about this. I mean, in Africa, it's, and because they are then claiming those mineral rights, which is what you know, and the rare earth minerals, which is what we all need to run our phones and technology and everything else. It's very important. Benedict, can we have a look at the FT? The end of the pandemic.
Yes, I think we've all been slowly getting used to the idea that we are, as restrictions are lifted and people begin to pay a lot less attention to them anyway, and actually, as we sort of approach the fourth set of booster jabs, we have all been sort of mentally coming to terms with the fact that the worst of it is over. It's this is what Moderna, the pharmaceutical company, certainly believes, but it's also believes that COVID vaccines for the over 50s and 60s for vulnerable people will become part and parcel of life, a bit like flu jabs. And, you know, a lot of people will say, well, you know, that's a pharmaceutical company's got to try and make that money out of COVID jabs. But I think ultimately, if you look at how this pandemic has gone in the round, we've actually got off, in terms of the sort of the medical impact, quite well. We've done quite well out of it. If you look at the total rate of mortality, a lot of people say, an awful lot of people have died. But actually, 2 and a bit years is not bad for something that, at one point people genuinely thought would be catastrophic, something that hasn't happened for over a century.
Well, a lot of the experts said pandemics always last about 5 to 6 years.
Yes, I mean, if you look at the really terrible ones throughout, history, I know it's a bit of a cliche to go back to the Black Death, but, these things do just keep on going and going and going. It is, I think, a great relief that a pharmaceutical company of the size of Moderna is actively saying, this is it. It's going to be done by this year, and that it will just be people who are in the most vulnerable categories who might just want to, take precautions, who will be getting the jabs going forward.
Have a top up. Yeah.
Let's
hope so.
I think it's really quite weird that the day that the pandemic officially ended in the UK, February the 24th, all hell broke out. You get rid of one problem and then...
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
The very day.
It's bewildering, isn't it? I think, to a lot of people. OK, shall we move on then to, even nicer. This is another sort of subject that's a very 21st century problem, but social media trolls.
Yeah, there's going to be more of a crackdown on anonymous people on social media.
Right.
They don't, you don't know who they are. They just
how do you
assume...
stop it?
Well, it says they'll be blocked. I was talking about this yesterday because I said I was coming on to a friend and I said, I'd be very wary to directly criticise Putin because from experience, the next thing is you get the bots, not real people, attacking you personally. Now, this happened to me when I made comments about Saudi Arabia and its role in Yemen, which has been awful and very underreported, but, genocide, mass starvation and the rest of it. And stirred up by Saudi Arabia, don't bother. Anyway, this friend of mine said, oh, yes, when I made comments about Israel and Gaza and stuff like that, I got the same thing. Well, that's on an industrial, geopolitical scale, but and also you do get people who just take again what you said and hide behind.
Yeah.
So how can you crack down on people who are anonymous?
By just blocking their accounts, by not allowing anonymous accounts.
I tend to think that this is a lot of guff, actually, by governments. And what I've found from what I've experienced in the sort of the tech world, the online sphere, is very often the smartest people in the fields are not working for governments. They're working for themselves, or they're working for companies like Apple, companies like Google, because that's where the money is. So whenever a government says, we're going to crack down on this anonymous stuff, the best and brightest are far ahead in terms of finding ways around that. And, that's the way that the internet develops. That's the way that, the online sphere moves. It's way ahead of governments. Governments can't keep up. So whenever I hear this sort of thing, I think it's very dangerous, but I also think it's not going to succeed, because actually even countries like China that, do take this sort of thing very seriously and do crack down on people, they're not able to stamp out all anonymous activity, all, sort of dissent. It's very difficult to do, and I'm really not sure, actually, it's a particularly good use of the UK's resources to be putting money into, blocking nasty people online and trolls, when actually, as we are all experiencing, there are far more important areas of cybersecurity.
Well, we've had a nice message on Twitter this morning.
Oh, have we?
Yeah, we had a photo, didn't we? Did a selfie and I posted it, and we had a lovely message from a not anonymous listener, viewer and listener. They'll know the area. It said, "Liz, you are lovely, and Stephen's okay too." So that's
okay.
It's all right. Tell them about your dress. Tell them about your dress.
Well, it
Bargain hunter.
Yeah, this is my best bargain ever. This was from the market in The Hague, and it was €4.
That's very good. I think you should have invented a big designer name, though, and just said, it's a Valentine.
It's good that you're wearing something from The Hague on today of all days.
Well, that's right. Yeah, why not?
Oh, well, a bargain. We like a bargain.
We do like a bargain.
OK, now, it's as if things weren't depressing enough. Let's talk about student loans.
It's, again, everybody says that the cockroaches would be the only things that survive a nuclear war, but no, student loans will still be here as well. We'll never end up paying these off, and this is yet another hit on younger people. This is the story that people who currently have student loans will no longer have to stop paying them after 30 years. They'll keep paying them for 40 years. And on top of that, the threshold at which you start repaying will go down from £27,000 to £25,000. And we know where this is going. In a couple of years, it'll be 23, and then it'll be, and so on and so forth. It is... Honestly, it is one of the worst deals that has ever been sold to a generation of young people who were...
particularly as they move the goalposts.
They move the goalposts, the cost of living goes up, the cost of houses go up, and the wages do not go up at the same time.
And this is the very generation that's feeling really rawly done by.
And the thing is...
if you're going to go to university, knowing that you're going to pay the money, your money is going to have to be paid back, and it's not that I'm not sympathetic, I am, but, there are too many. Clearly, there are too many people who are, and it's lapsing, and then so the government isn't getting the money back.
And a lot of this is done, I'm afraid, and was always done to massage unemployment figures amongst young people. I mean, it's a huge lie that has been sold to young people that they need to get degrees in order to get jobs. That once upon a time they never needed degrees in order to get. They could learn on the job. And as I say, this is a generation of people who are being plunged deeper and deeper into debt, even as they
And
age.
in the last couple of years, they've had a pretty shoddy education from the universities, because a lot of it's had to be virtual or non-existent. And now we learn that the universities have been raking it in, and they're making huge profits.
The standards of education provided in a lot of British universities is not good enough. You're right, there are too many people going to university. I think that there are far too many university courses that just aren't actually worth the money. And there is a reckoning that's going to come down the line. At some point, fewer people are going to go to university, or some universities, I think, are going to have to be closed, somewhere in the middle, because we can't keep doing this. It's an inflation within a generation of people, and it is unsustainable.
Yeah, it's just not fair. There are plenty of apprenticeships are always the way forward.
Yes.
You get a really good, solid career out of an apprenticeship.
Absolutely.
And not have to fork out £9,000 a year plus all the rest of it.
I did journalism as an apprenticeship. Did you go to university?
I went to university, but it was the year they changed from polys to unis. So it was Nottingham Poly became Nottingham Trent University.
Did you go to uni to do your
Yes, I went to
journalism?
Russell Group University.
Oh,
did you, darling?
Went to Leeds.
Oh, great! Yeah.
So did my dad. So did my brother.
But
I did a course which is absolutely nothing to do. I got the education of getting into music and local radio and being in a band and writing for the Yorkshire Post.
But you presumably went to university on a grant?
Oh, yeah. My dad had to pay, it was means tested, so I had to pay some maintenance,
But education was paid for.
But the education was absolutely...
I went to Liverpool, I don't remember most of it. And I think actually that tells you about the standard of the course.
Did you go on a grant? Or...
No. I've got the full whack of loan
really?
that I'm having to pay. Yeah,
I got a grant.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the smuggest because I was paid to learn the craft.
You're self-made.
I was, yeah.
Social mobility.
That's the way. Look, thank you both. It's been really good to see you both this morning. Liz Kershaw.
Thank you.
It's been a bit depressing, to be honest.
Well, we've ended with a smile.
But we've learned
Yes.
a lot.
Yeah.
Just learned a lot. Watching you do the interviews and sitting and talking to the guests has been people you wouldn't normally meet. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Good. Well, that'll be £100.
Yeah, I'm glad you've had a good time. Glad you've had a good time in the green room.
I'll pay you to come on, shall I?
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
OK, let's turn our attention to matters closer to home. And councils in southern England say there's going to be a tidal wave of homeless people over the next 2 years.
Apparently, families are being left without a home because of benefits freezes, soaring food and energy bills, as well as the end of COVID eviction bans.
Well, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation says this spring energy prices will hit single adult households on lower incomes the hardest, and they say low-income families could be forced into paying 54% of their incomes on bills, and this could push them into becoming homeless.
Our South East of England reporter Ellie Costello visited a temporary accommodation shelter in Basildon in Essex.
This is Arne Court in Basildon. It's a short-term supported housing scheme for people who are homeless. There are 36 properties on site here. People can stay here for a few weeks to 6 months before a council house is found for them, or they move on to private rentals. There's concern here that demand for these services are only going to increase as the cost of living means more and more people are forced into homelessness. In April, energy bills alone will be up £700 on average for families. I spoke to the manager of Arne Court, Samantha Hampshire.
And bills are going to go up on average about £700 per family. What does £700 mean for people here?
They don't have £700 extra on top of their kind of benefits or their low income at the moment, so it's going to be a case of them choosing to decide like whether to heat their homes or eat. It really is that kind of cut and dry. They're already using food banks and things like that, so it really will. They'll be cold, or they'll go without hot water, or decide whether they want food or heating for that week. A lot of our tenants are already on the top-up meters, so they're already at a disadvantage because the top-up meters are more expensive than having, say, a contract. We'll definitely be relying on food banks and sort of donations. We've got donations of like shampoo, shower gels, food, clothing to try and help the people that are living here.
Will there be more demand for the services, do you think?
I believe so, yeah. We already see a lot of people come here that are, for example, in privately rented accommodation before they come here, and with the benefit caps or the reduction in their income, people that have lost their jobs or the price of living and sort of private rent's gone up, they come here because they can no longer afford to stay in their current properties and they get evicted because they can't afford to pay the rent.
I met Shannon, who is a single mum with 2 children who lives in Arne Court. She works in the local Poundland and earns minimum wage, but she fears that she won't ever be able to afford to privately rent again.
I think we're all exactly in the same boat. We're all worried about what's going to hit us, kind of thing, when we do get our places with money. It's just too hard for everybody. Don't matter how much you work, money goes nowhere basically. Everything else has gone up apart from everybody's wages, so it is difficult. Yeah, it's scary. It is.
Crisis charities say the cost of living crisis is where people already under crippling financial pressure are edging closer to homelessness as they struggle to afford basic necessities like heating, eating and keeping a roof over their heads. To stop these warnings from becoming a reality, the government needs to invest in the local housing allowance so it truly covers the cost of rent across the country, alongside a strategy to deliver the genuinely affordable homes needed so that everyone has a place to call home. A Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities government spokesperson said that this year councils have been given an extra £65 million to support low-income households with rent arrears. We've also set up a £316 million homelessness prevention grant, which will help people who are homeless or at risk of losing their home to find a new one, get help with evictions or move into temporary accommodation. But for those like Shannon who are already in temporary accommodation, like here in Arne Court in Basildon, there are concerns for the future of the residents. They worry they won't ever be able to afford a home of their own again. Ellie Costello, GB News.
Well, stay with us. We're going to be talking to the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, about the latest in Ukraine. First, so here's your weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Following yesterday's cold winds and wintry showers, it is a freezing start in places this morning. Frost and ice about, but plenty of sunshine, and it's looking like a decent day as high pressure builds in from the southwest. That's going to kill off the wind and the showers this morning, and it will lead to plenty of sunshine for at least a few hours in most places. So a bright start to the day, still 1 or 2 showers coming through the Irish Sea coast and northwest England, the Midlands, for example. Otherwise, they tend to ease during the morning. By this afternoon, plenty of sunshine breaking out, and with lighter winds compared to yesterday, it will feel pleasant enough in that sunshine. Temperatures reaching 10 or 11 Celsius in Cardiff, Southampton, London, Plymouth, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8s and 9s. But for Western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, cloud and some outbreaks of rain move in by the end of the afternoon, falling as snow over the Scottish mountains. That moves through, but it stays cloudy for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, and increasingly breezy tonight and through the early hours of Saturday. Also breezy for western coasts of England and Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells, lighter winds, a touch of frost, 1 to 3 Celsius in the southeast, whereas for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 6 and 7 Celsius because of the breeze and because of the cloud. Mostly, Saturday's looking like a dry day. There'll be plenty of sunshine for England and Wales, hazy sunshine at times with some high cloud in the sky. But thicker cloud for Scotland and Northern Ireland, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle at times, mainly over western hills, and increasingly windy, risk of gales for the Western Isles as well as for Shetland. That breeze, though, coming in from the south will allow temperatures to reach 9 or 10 Celsius in most spots. Sunday sees an area of rain move in from the west. This will be heavy at first for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. It'll move through into central areas and tend to weaken.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Multiple explosions rock Ukraine for a second night, leaving residential buildings ablaze. This is the scene this morning of some of the damage.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 9 on Friday, February the 25th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne. We're live across the UK on your TV and radio, of course, but these are your top stories this morning.
Ukraine's foreign minister says Kyiv has been hit by rocket strikes overnight, leaving some buildings in ruins.
President Vladimir Zelensky pleads for help from the West, saying, "Who is ready to fight alongside us? I don't see anyone." He added that the Russian invasion has already led to 137 deaths.
Well, meanwhile, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has revealed a package of further EU sanctions against Russia.
And if you want to let us know your views on the situation in Ukraine, then do email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews.
So let's get straight into the very latest situation with Ukraine, and the Russian attack continues for a second day. Several explosions were heard overnight in the capital, Kyiv.
And we're told a short time ago an advisor to Ukraine's president said that 2 cruise missiles have been shot down, along with 1 plane. Anyway, let's find out the very latest from our GB News Home and Security Editor, Mark White. What do you know of that, Mark?
Well, Anne, we have got some pictures relating to the plane. You can see from the images that have come out via the Reuters news agency that there is wreckage that certainly appears to be an aircraft. It's not been independently confirmed that this is a Russian aircraft, but the Ukrainian military and presidential spokesman is saying that they believe that it is a Russian military aircraft. I think that's the wrong pictures, actually, not the pictures from the Ukrainian capital. There you can see the wreckage there, I think, of that aircraft. Also, cruise missiles, again, according to the Ukrainian military, they have managed to shoot down 2 of the cruise missiles that were launched towards the Ukrainian capital. But Kyiv has come under very significant bombardment again in the early hours of this morning, about 4 or 5 o'clock local time. Missiles, the sirens sounded first of all, of course, and then the missiles came in with thuds and explosions. Residential areas in particular, I know there are again pictures circulating showing these residential areas, these apartment blocks in the capital, where we're told that at least 3 people, according to Kyiv's mayor, have been injured in the incidents and missile strikes overnight.
I mean, it seems pretty clear at this stage that Russia has got air superiority. I mean, certainly one of the first tactics you would imagine would have been to degrade the air defence systems in Ukraine.
Yes, that's absolutely right, Stephen. It's command and control that the Russians went after initially. So there were attacks on air defence systems, command and control systems right across Ukraine yesterday. In fact, some 200 separate attacks, according to the Russian military. Now, they have claimed that they achieved their objectives of degrading the air defence systems for Ukraine. That may well be true. One thing they didn't seem to get right in terms of taking full control is a military airport on the outskirts of Kyiv, the scene of some really fierce fighting. It came under attack from Russian fast attack helicopters yesterday during the day. Again, very dramatic images that were released of that. You saw these attack helicopters going over, firing these decoy flares out as they went to try and ensure that they could deflect from any shoulder-launched missiles. Well, despite this, according to the Ukrainian military, they were able to bring down 2 of those Russian helicopters. Hundreds of Russian paratroopers landed to try to secure the airport to allow thousands more of their colleagues in to that airport. But according again to the Ukrainian military, they were able to launch a fierce defence of the airport, and that airport is either back in Ukrainian control or at the very least it's not secure enough for Russia to use properly to take more troops into Ukraine.
Well, Mark, thanks very much for the moment. I know that you'll be briefing and bringing everybody up to date here on GB News throughout the day. Let's bring you up to date on other headlines this morning. And car production fell to its lowest January total in 13 years as semiconductor shortages and global supply issues took their toll. Figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders show that despite an increase in the number of electric vehicles being made, just under 69,000 cars left factories last month, and that's down 20% on the year before.
3 former Minneapolis police officers have been convicted of violating 46-year-old George Floyd's civil rights in June 2020. The trio were all charged with failing to provide medical aid when police officer Derek Chauvin held his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes.
Photographs of celebrities, including former Love Island presenter Caroline Flack, are part of a new free mental health project. Ms. Flack took her own life 2 years ago at the age of just 40. The digital exhibition will run in March and April on the Piccadilly Lights in London. It's encouraging people to take a moment to look after their mental well-being.
Well, it's time for telemedicine, and today we're joined by Dr. Veena Babu. Good to see you this morning. And it's interesting, we're reflecting on mental health, and we know it's a huge issue at the moment, but actually something which is under a lot of pressure because of the current situation. And a lot of people concerned about, it's not just young people actually, but elderly relatives as well, reliving what they've been through in the past. Jim's been in touch this morning saying, my 16-year-old daughter is feeling extreme anxiety because of the situation in Ukraine. What can we do?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Not just having to live through this, but helping young people navigate all of these emotions. I would say the first thing would be to normalise it, normalise the anxiety, that it's absolutely fine to feel that way. It's not just young people, even adults, like you correctly said. We feel it too. Maybe having an open and transparent dialogue about the inequalities and disparities that are going on in the world, limiting the amount of time young people maybe spend on social media. I think that's harder to kind of control, but maybe having a check-in as a family once or twice a day to make sure everyone's hearing the same kind of news and just openly talking about it. I think that's important. And
yeah, it's rationalising the headlines, isn't it? Because some of them are really horrific. And there has been so much talk of World War III. And I just don't know what you're meant to say to young people who are frightened of that.
I 100% agree, because I think anxiety, as we were just coming to curb it with things normalising with COVID, overnight it seems like, are we now talking about another war? Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be a challenge.
Does it sound daft, or do things like, I know it's not possible for everyone, but family dinner time, family tea time, where you actually you're all sat down together, and so things can be aired.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes it's quite good to have Granny or somebody say, look, we lived through this, the 1950s or 60s or something.
Yeah.
And I know that they will also, because I've tried this at home, they all go, oh yeah, but. But at the same time, you say, yeah, but we did live through it. It seemed like the end of the world then, and it wasn't. We'll get through this.
Yeah, it's the same as a pandemic, isn't it? We're talking about other pandemics that people live through, and you're sharing experiences. But a sense of unity, normalising the anxiety and limiting what they're exposed to, I think that's realistic, that we can, hope for right now.
OK, look, moving from one issue to another, Alison has got in touch. Morning to you, Alison.
Morning, Alison.
Clearly struggling one way or another. She says, how do you know if you've got the onset of arthritis?
OK, so there are different types of arthritis. There's osteoarthritis, which is wear and tear of the joints, and there's rheumatoid arthritis, which is more autoimmune. So you want to look out for things like joint swelling, stiffness, maybe any nodules coming up on the hands, knees, any of the joints, morning stiffness or evening stiffness. If these are consistent symptoms, see your doctor, see your GP, so we can examine and do a few more tests to see what could be happening.
What can be done about it, though? If you are diagnosed with it, is there anything that can be done?
So it depends which type you have. Most of us, if you lead a very active lifestyle, will end up getting an element of osteoarthritis because it's wear and tear of the joints. For treatment for that, it would be exercise, physiotherapy, painkillers, and if it comes to it, operation, steroid injections or joint replacements. Whereas the other type, the RA, the rheumatoid, is the more serious one. So you need to be referred quite urgently to a rheumatologist so you can start.
So if you've got these aches and pains, you really should go to see your GP. Yeah, because, as you say, early diagnosis can mean early treatment, which can at least help. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Rheumatoid arthritis. My sister-in-law has that. It's dreadful.
Yeah.
Dreadful.
Graham says, I'm plagued by lower back pains, especially when I wake in the morning. Oh, I'm with you on that, Graham. What can I do to help ease it? I don't want to continually take painkillers.
Nobody does, do they? No. I'm so sorry to hear that, Graham. So back pain is one of the most common things we see coming through the door in our GB practices. The fact that he gets them in the morning, I'd be intrigued to know what his bed is like in terms of comfort, in terms of his posture. So first thing would be to address that, make sure he has a comfortable mattress, he's getting good sleep in the night. I would like to also know what he does for work. You know, is he quite active and hands-on, or is he sitting on a chair? Then we'd want to address how comfortable the desk or the chair is. If there are other symptoms like weakness or, again, joint swellings and things, he would need to be examined. So if it's consistent, we don't want him to be reliant on painkillers. What everyone does think, though, is when you have back pain, you should rest or lie down.
It can make it worse.
Absolutely.
I know. I find bed a torture instrument. Absolutely. Because if I'm in bed for too long, in fact, I'm much healthier if I get up every 3 or 4 hours and walk around a bit.
That's exactly what we need to tell everyone. No, it's true. So back pain, the worst thing you could do is rest for lower back pain. You need to
Why? What's happening to the lower back?
So if we think about it, so that's our spine, and you have muscles holding up and supporting the spine. You want to strengthen the lower back muscles so that it can hold your spine better. So things like even walking, running. If you can't do that, weight-bearing exercises, even if not with weights, your own body weight, doing squats.
What sort of squats, really?
Yeah, squats while you're watching
TV. I'm going to try that.
Standing and...
I'm going to try it because it is. I know, I've sensed that. The longer I sleep, the worse it is.
Yeah, you should rest. You shouldn't just rest for back pain.
I would be hell to live with. I couldn't be married at the moment, could I? I'd be getting up every 3 or 4 hours and walking around and making a cup of tea and things.
Look, from your complaints to one of mine, which Hannah has got as well. Morning, Hannah. She says, I have constant itchiness in my left ear. Well, it's in my right.
That's where you wear your
Is this down to a build-up of wax? Well, I haven't got wax in my ears.
Not necessarily.
But
so
why is it? I was thinking, is it like an eczema or something like that?
Yeah, it could be. So we'd want to actually get the ear examined. It could be eczema, could be psoriasis, could be a foreign body. I hope you're not putting cotton buds in your ears. That's the worst thing you can do.
But that's what you want to do,
isn't it? You just use it to clean the outside, but not the inside. So itching is not because of wax by itself. So I'd want to have it examined by a doctor to see what it could be.
I've had that one too. I've had them all now, I think.
Yeah, well, yes, I've not had all of them.
No, you can't, and I haven't.
Look, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you. I hope we put your mind at rest. I mean, a lot of if it's anything serious, go and get it checked out.
I'm going to try it.
Dr. Babu.
More exercise, that's what I need. I knew it. I knew it would come down to that. Squats. I haven't done squats for years. I'm going to try.
Stay with us, though. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll get the very latest on the situation in Ukraine. We'll talk to the Secretary of State for Defence, Ben Wallace. So don't go anywhere.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Following yesterday's cold winds and wintry showers, it is a freezing start in places this morning. Frost and ice about, but plenty of sunshine, and it's looking like a decent day as high pressure builds in from the southwest. That's going to kill off the wind and the showers this morning, and it will lead to plenty of sunshine for at least a few hours in most places. So a bright start to the day, still 1 or 2 showers coming through the Irish Sea coast and northwest England, the Midlands, for example. Otherwise, they tend to ease during the morning. By this afternoon, plenty of sunshine breaking out, and with lighter winds compared to yesterday, it will feel pleasant enough in that sunshine. Temperatures reaching 10 or 11 Celsius in Cardiff, Southampton, London, Plymouth, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8s and 9s. But for Western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, cloud and some outbreaks of rain move in by the end of the afternoon, falling as snow over the Scottish mountains. That moves through, but it stays cloudy for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, and increasingly breezy tonight and through the early hours of Saturday. Also breezy for western coasts of England and Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells, lighter winds, a touch of frost, 1 to 3 Celsius in the southeast, whereas for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 6 and 7 Celsius because of the breeze and because of the cloud. Mostly, Saturday is looking like a dry day. There'll be plenty of sunshine for England and Wales, hazy sunshine at times with some high cloud in the sky. But thicker cloud for Scotland and Northern Ireland, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle at times, mainly over Western Hills, and increasingly windy, risk of gales for the Western Isles as well as for Shetland. That breeze, though, coming in from the south will allow temperatures to reach 9 or 10 Celsius in most spots. Sunday sees an area of rain move in from the west. This will be heavy at first for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. It'll move through into central areas and tend to weaken.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
(9:18) and the main news, of course, today is the continuing Russian attack on Ukraine, continuing for a second day.
Yeah, several explosions were heard overnight in the capital, Kyiv. At least 137 people, we're told, have been killed. Paul Hawkins has this report.
In Kyiv, in Kharkiv and other cities, another sleepless night. These people sheltering in a subway station in northeast Kharkiv, Ukraine's second biggest city. Rubbing shoulders next to strangers, it's crowded and noisy, but at least it's safer, or feels safer, than being above ground. For those that choose to go, many are heading for the 332-mile eastern border with Poland.
Przygotowujemy się od wielu tygodni.
The country's interior minister saying it had been preparing for weeks to face the wave of refugees that can be expected. We will do everything possible to give shelter in Poland to everyone in need, he said. Poland is a safe country for its citizens and will be a safe place for our neighbours, friends, those who are now in such a difficult situation. What we're witnessing are scenes we thought were relegated to Europe's history from the 20th century.
We're going here to Poland, and then we'll may probably go to Cyprus.
To our friends.
To our friends to stay for when the bombing, the hot situation comes down a little bit.
My husband told me that I'm panicking and it won't happen, and now it's true, and this is absolutely incredible.
But Poland isn't the only destination. Apart from Russia, Ukraine borders 6 countries, including Romania, where this woman was heading.
Yes, of course, there are some rockets flying and bombings, but yeah, people are nervous. It's a kind of panic. We have long lines on the petrol stations, but it's just panic.
Ukraine's neighbours are preparing to take in millions of refugees now. But it won't be long before other countries, including the UK, will also be asked to step up. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Well, look, let's talk to someone who's right at the very top of this, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace. Good morning to you. Look, I want to kick straight off, Secretary of State, with a question that I've been sent by a soldier who's on standby, ready for this as it escalates. And they say simply, at what point will you decide that you need to escalate higher than sanctions?
Well, first of all, we have put many of those soldiers on standby under effectively indirect command of the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, that is the Senior General at NATO. We will respond to this as NATO, 30 countries, a massive alliance, and therefore if we are required to send troops, to stand up troops in readiness, deploy them to other parts of the world or other parts of Europe, we will do that under his command. That's when we will do those decisions. We will act as one body, all 30 nations. That's how we deliver our mass, it's how we deliver our firepower, and that's why we've already seen in some cases more troops going to Estonia. We've doubled it from a battle group to 2 battle groups and a brigade headquarters. That's nearly 2,000 troops. Last night our RAF jets did the first policing of the airspace in Romania and in Poland, and we've got for the Eastern Mediterranean and the Black Sea. And we have another 1,000 troops on standby, probably one of your contributors that you're referring to, in case they are needed by the Supreme Allied Commander in NATO.
The boots on the ground, British boots on the ground in this war.
Well, we're not putting any troops into Ukraine. That would put British troops fighting directly Russian forces, and that would trigger a wider war in Europe. That is because Russia would inevitably then attack Britain. Britain is part of NATO. That would trigger the whole Article 5 full self-defense. And sadly and regretfully, and Britain has definitely been at the forefront in supporting Ukraine on this, Ukraine is not in NATO, so it doesn't get the benefit of the mutual self-defense of 30 countries, ranging from Turkey to Portugal to Norway, all able to come to each other's defence. But we can do the next best thing, which is provide them with lethal aid and non-lethal aid, which Britain has again been the first at Europe to do so, alongside countries elsewhere. And so we can do that, and that's what we're doing right now. But fundamentally, President Putin is not thinking rationally. He's got overwhelming forces on the border of Ukraine, well now in Ukraine, thousands and thousands of troops, 65% of his whole combat forces surrounding and invading one country. That is a real challenge. We'll do everything we can to help them, but Putin seems set on a course of action that will forever isolate him and lead to huge suffering.
President Zelensky, we know, he's spoken to the Prime Minister today and asked the Prime Minister for counter-action, which, as you said, is not going to happen at this stage. But we have supplied a lot of weapons, NLAWs and javelins, particularly to those Ukrainian troops. Colonel Richard Kemp earlier on told us that we should keep supplying those weapons if the Ukrainian troops need them. Will we do that?
Well, look, we have said we'll continue to supply defensive aid, both lethal and non-lethal, if we can. Now, it's a difficult situation. Obviously, the Russians have closed down the airspace. It's not as easy as it did before they invaded. And, of course, I can't speculate on too much detail because it would now put people at risk who were doing that task. But fundamentally, we want to keep supporting them as much as we can. And some of these systems are making a difference. The javelins were provided by the United States and some of the Baltic states. The NLAWs were provided by us. Stinger anti-air missiles have been provided by Baltic states into Ukraine, and they are making a difference. But will they make a difference against a force that's huge in size? Well, we will help the resolve and the hope for the Ukrainian people. But, we have to deter Putin from going all the way. At the moment, he keeps going. But there is some ray of light and hope for the Ukrainians. Russia failed to get its objectives in the first 24 hours. It had planned a number of cities. It had failed to do that. It lost over 450 personnel of the army. It lost fighter jets and aircraft and helicopters and armoured vehicles. And the world has seen Putin for what he is. And that will, give him a legacy he doesn't want.
We'll have to leave it there, sadly, because we're running out of time. Thank you very much for speaking to us. That's Secretary of State for Defence, Ben Wallace. Thank you very much.
It is just such a concerning situation, and whether or not we end up with boots on the ground or not, he's saying no, there is absolutely no appetite for that at the moment because that would trigger a much wider conflict. That's an understandable position. But as we were saying earlier on, this could be a situation where we are looking at significant deployments around those NATO border countries indefinitely as a result of all of this, as Richard Kemp was saying, until Putin is no longer in power, whenever that may be. It's a concerning situation.
But we'll keep you up to date on everything if you keep watching GB News, of course, and listening to us on the radio. But that's it from us. Stay tuned, because coming up next is The Briefing with Tom Harwood.
Hello again, I'm Ada McGiven. Following yesterday's cold winds and wintry showers, it is a freezing start in places this morning. Frost and ice about, but plenty of sunshine, and it's looking like a decent day as high pressure builds in from the southwest. That's going to kill off the wind and the showers this morning, and it will lead to plenty of sunshine for at least a few hours in most places. So a bright start to the day, still 1 or 2 showers coming through the Irish Sea coast and northwest England, the Midlands, for example. Otherwise, they tend to ease during the morning. By this afternoon, plenty of sunshine breaking out, and with lighter winds compared to yesterday, it will feel pleasant enough in that sunshine. Temperatures reaching 10 or 11 Celsius in Cardiff, Southampton, London, Plymouth, and for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 8s and 9s. But for Western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, cloud and some outbreaks of rain move in by the end of the afternoon, falling as snow over the Scottish mountains. That moves through, but it stays cloudy for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, and increasingly breezy tonight and through the early hours of Saturday. Also breezy for western coasts of England and Wales. But elsewhere, clear spells, lighter winds, a touch of frost, 1 to 3 Celsius in the southeast, whereas for Scotland and Northern Ireland, 6 and 7 Celsius because of the breeze and because of the cloud. Mostly, Saturday's looking like a dry day. There'll be plenty of sunshine for England and Wales, hazy sunshine at times with some high cloud in the sky. But thicker cloud for Scotland and Northern Ireland, some light outbreaks of rain and drizzle at times, mainly over western hills, and increasingly windy, risk of gales for the Western Isles as well as for Shetland. That breeze, though, coming in from the south will allow temperatures to reach 9 or 10 Celsius in most spots. Sunday sees an area of rain move in from the west. This will be heavy at first for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. It'll move through into central areas and tend to weaken.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 9:30 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and on your radio. Today we have 3 experts on the war in Ukraine and how it affects us here in the UK. An MP, a former ambassador and a super forecaster. We'll also be exploring those new reforms to tuition fees snuck out yesterday amid a lot of news. It's a great show today and you won't want to miss it. All to come after these headlines.